We've completed the executive session. There is no action to report. And we will now be starting with our regular business meeting. And we start that with the pledge. And I think I'm going back to Miss Felice, who's the only one with the flag on her screen. So if you can stand, stand. If not, just let's do the pledge.
This flag is a picture from the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. Emergency evacuation. Anybody who's on the campus, know your way out of the buildings and go to the exit safely in case of an emergency, and no smoking anywhere on campus. For those at remote locations, again, make sure you know a way out. Okay. We have next the board consent agenda. And I'm going to break this out, and let's do a motion to approve items C1 through C4. And then we'll do C5 separately. So it's a motion to approve C1 through C4. Ms. Aruda made the motion. Ms. Ancona seconded it. Questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimously approved. Then we have C5, which is a webinar called Building a More Diverse Workforce that's being put on by the New York State School Boards Association Leadership Development. And I know Ms. Felice indicated she wanted to go. I had already registered for it because this is a good one. There's no cost to the district and us attending. So if any member of the board wants to participate, I think that in the email, there was the flyer for this program, and it's really easy to register. It just has a little thing you click on and it's done. So if you want to do it, take care of it for yourself. But we need I guess we'll go ahead and take a motion to approve the attendance of any member who wants to attend, you know, just in case. So is there a motion to approve attendance? Mr. Trent made the motion. It's seconded by Ms. Ancona. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 6. I didn't see Mr. Pacini. Is it okay? Yes, it's unanimously approved. So C5 is also approved. Next, we have the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple items I would like to announce. First of which, with regard to interscholastic athletics, a successful winter season is wrapping up this week with an abbreviated fall season all set to start. March 1st, the start will be for high school fall sports, and March 22nd for middle school fall sports. We continue our high-risk sport COVID-19 testing for the middle school and high school students and adults participating in fall and then in volleyball for this fall season. And for the board's information, to date, we've administered over 240 tests with only one positive case result. So those are pretty good results. Yesterday, I visited the high school to see their testing program firsthand. I was very impressed by the organization and efficiency of the process. Little to my knowledge, by announcing I was coming to stop by, they had them all slated to be tested. So I went through the entire process and got firsthand knowledge on what it entails. And it's very quick, very efficient, and painless. So kudos to Mr. McIntyre, all of our nurses, responders, and those involved in this effort, because they're simply doing a fantastic job keeping our kids safe and keeping our kids participating. So thank you all. Next item, through a collaborative effort between the Suffolk County Schools and the Suffolk County Department of Health, 33 of our special education teachers, TAs, or aides are participating in the county's vaccination program for special educators. It was scheduled to go on last week. However, due to weather, it was delayed, and first dose vaccinations are now set to begin on tomorrow and through Saturday. So 33 of our folks are going to get vaccination as a result of that cooperative program. On Monday, the board may have heard this. I know faculty has. Governor Cuomo issued an executive order requiring teachers to report to their district that they have received the COVID-19 vaccination. The executive order does not appear to imply or require a teacher to receive the COVID vaccination, but beginning Friday and every Friday thereafter, we are required to report to the DOH the number of completed COVID-19 vaccinations reported in the prior week, the number and the percentage of teachers that are instructing in person during the prior week, and any other data elements that the commissioner determines needs to be reported. We sent a survey out earlier today to collect this data as we know it at this point, but we are awaiting further guidance from the DOH regarding this recording requirement. I wasn't intended to take questions, but I see Mr. Ruda has a hand up.
And I apologize for interrupting your superintendent's report. I do believe that new information did come out today in regards to reporting for teachers with the vaccination. And I don't know if John has any information on this, but I do believe that that may be changing the teachers reporting for the vaccinations. John, I don't know if you can weigh in on this right now.
I haven't seen any change in the executive order.
I do believe that something may be coming out. From my understanding, something did come out today, and if it's not on your desk today, then it will be within the next few days. So it's my understanding that that is not going to be happening. So I just want to kind of put that out there.
Okay, well, I haven't received any other guidance that I did receive regarding the executive order. Obviously, if things change, we'll report that to our teachers. But as of now, our requirement is to report it, and the survey did go out. Next item, the governor has also extended his suspension of the open meetings law, thereby permitting virtual meetings through March 24th, 2021. And then finally, for the community and the board's information, as of today, we have 85 faculty or staff members and 196 students. COVID-19 positive cases reported to the district. And with regard to quarantine, as of today, we have 0 faculty and staff and only 5 students in quarantine as a result of close contact. And tomorrow, as Mr. Frankie mentioned before we entered public session, the high school will be holding a ceremony to commemorate the visit of the late Congressman John Lewis to Belport High School. Congressman Lewis visited Belport High School, their summer program students back in July of 2000 to discuss his work for social justice in the United States. And the high school will be commemorating that visit with a brief ceremony and the unveiling of a beautiful plaque as a permanent historical marker at the high school. So a very, very, very noteworthy event. Very small invitation pool went out. I understand Mr. Frankie said he wasn't invited. The board was invited, but it's going to be a very small social distance event. And that is all I have, Ms. Hayes. I turn it over to you.
All right. I think the next is trustee and advisory committee report.
I just had a quick question on one of the items that the superintendent raised.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. With respect to rolling out the winter sports, did we get any information back on our request for spectators?
Oh, I'll be reporting. So you know what? I'll let Mr. Pacini comment when he does his report. But I think
If you want me to report, I did get a communication from Mr. Combs that I'll share with everybody.
But I
But
can.
it wasn't an official response to our letter. Let's put it that way. I'll explain. why.
Was or was not?
Tom Combs and I have known each other for a very long time. I'd sent him a communication before ours just to touch base about it, and he had replied back. So I was going to report on that communication tonight.
But this was not an official response.
No. It wasn't like he responded to that. I had sent him a private note just to connect on this and something else, and he
Okay.
replied. And I think, I guess I'll have to read it again, but I was going to report on it tonight. I guess it could be. I guess he could have killed two birds with one stone, so to speak. But I'd have to read it again. It was just a one-line thanks and some jargon that I'll share. Unless you want me to share it now. He just basically, we touched base on some personal things. And I had kind of offhandedly berated him a little bit about the no spectators based on our relationship. And the canned response is that it's a committee of athletic directors and superintendents, et cetera, made up of the Suffolk County Schools that voted on that, which was kind of a non-answer to the question, which is why I asked it to be on the agenda, although I did get some additional answers I could report on. But basically, my issue with the whole initiative on spectators, and our request was simply to have spectators for one night, for a senior night. The issue was within not just our community, the Suffolk County community is, does Section 11 have the authority to determine who comes and goes from our buildings? I contend that the answer is no, but the simple answer is that it's a member-driven organization, and members, representatives from every district voted, and that was the outcome of the vote, which leads me to my initial comments when we talked about it a few weeks ago was, the superintendents of Suffolk County did not want spectators in their buildings, and that's why we didn't have spectators at sporting events. He did go on to say that it is very likely that the spectator rule will be changed for the fall sports, and it is anticipated that 2 spectators per athlete will be allowed to attend for the home team only. However, he did not clarify if that includes volleyball, which is the only fall sport that is indoors. Everything else is outdoors: football, soccer, cross country, etc. So we really didn't get an answer, but I got some information through my own communication.
All right, let's
So-
go back to Dr. Gianni, who was going to respond to Ms. Felice's
Yeah,
question.
let me just add to that, because it's my understanding, first of all, winter's over, so obviously spectators and the letter didn't do anything to that regard. But it is my understanding that the athletic council will be voting on spectators for the upcoming fall season. And the vote will be for 2 home and 2 away spectators for outdoor sports, and 2 home spectators for indoor sports. That's my understanding of what will be voted on in the upcoming meeting. I think the meeting's next week. So we'll put more to follow in that regard.
Okay. All right, now we'll go to trustee and advisory committee reports, and I see Ms. Ancona's hand up.
I'm sorry, I do just have a quick question regarding the seniors.
Okay.
So I think it was on the Section 11 Facebook page, that some schools were doing a senior night after the games, and I know that winter sports are done. But do you think there's any way that we can get one of those done for like the basketball? Maybe they could scrimmage against each other, like those sports could scrimmage against each other, and maybe the parents can go see and have some kind of last hurrah with that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be somewhat difficult, because a lot of kids play on several sports. I mean, it's something we could.
Dr. Gianni, if I can add, at least from basketball does. So tomorrow night is the last. I was going to report on this too when I spoke later. Tomorrow night's the last basketball game of the regular season. If we win, we make the playoffs. That's another story. However, the coaches for at least varsity basketball do have a celebration, albeit virtual, to celebrate the seniors tomorrow night. I think the unfortunate thing is that there was very little time, because there are some school districts who held some senior ceremonies outside. I don't know of any that did it inside, but I'm sure they were. Some did it out in the parking lot, and obviously the last couple of weeks prevented anything. You would have really had to have some foresight and do that before the season to plan that. So, and it's a true shame, because the athletes thus far are the only ones who are going to miss out on that opportunity to play in front of family.
Well, maybe we can get something together on a weekend or a night or something for them, just to have that one, even if it's in the middle of next month or something. I mean, they're still going to be in school. They're still going to be together for a few more months, but I just thought that would be nice because I saw another school did that, and you know, they missed out on it and the parents missed out on it. So that was just my suggestion. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I don't have any advisory reports.
No advisory reports. Okay. Ms. Aruda, advisory report?
I did attend the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee, prior to the vacation. Actually, I believe that we had the Facebook, committee as well, but I want to touch upon the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee. I've been on the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee for, I believe this is my 6th year, mostly as a parent, and I've been through many different assistant superintendents that have run it in various formats, and some better than others. And I have to say that I was pleased that Ms. Doyle has come back to some of the ways that we have done it before in the past, where we have more communication and open dialogue about different things that are happening and that we're looking to do within the district. So I do believe, and I know that you were there, Ms. Hayes and Ms. Felice, so that we can really get a feel of the district, especially in these times when we can't go into the buildings and see what's going on, to be able to hear from not only the community members that are on the committee, but the teachers and the administrators, I really think is key in moving the district forward. So thank you to Ms. Doyle, who has led that committee and has really brought it back full circle to where it once was.
Thank you. Okay, next would be Ms. Felice.
Thank you. And yes, I agree with Ms. Aruda's take on teaching and learning committee. And it was very refreshing to hear just what's going on in the classroom, because we don't have a set of eyes in the classroom at this time. Or just real brief, just received an advocacy update that is for our legislative advocacy. I forwarded that off to administration and the legislative committee chair. We had a legislative committee meeting on Monday to kick off again what we want to do legislative wise in our district to advocate. Most important concern right now is the budget, the state budget, and of course what federal monies are coming back to the state that will hopefully trickle down to the district. The biggest issue this week in the advisory was the digital divide, and I know our district has spoken at length over making sure that all of our homes are connected so that we can stay in touch and keep learning consistent, and that was reiterated in this week's update. Thank you.
And you commented on the legislative committee, but I think you should report that the committee has determined that the chairman will be Chris Piccini and the advocacy liaison will be Cheryl Felice.
Okay, I know there was another agenda item for the legislative committee, so that's why I
Okay.
speaking more
I
about.
just kind of wanted to
Thank you.
be sure that we showcase that
Absolutely.
the committee has, this is a new committee and it's getting itself organized, and this is a big step. So thank you both for stepping up to do that, and to Mr. Parker for being the other member on the committee and contributing to the success of this committee. And that brings me to Mr. Parker, who was next.
Well, hi. I attended a almost said legislative committee, but it was an equity committee meeting last evening, and I found it most interesting. We talked about the goals that we are in process of creating. I think we're almost there in terms of goals. We talked about the diversity that is involved in the school and this group. There were a group of, I think, 15 young people of all races and ethnicities. And they talked about some of the questions that they proposed to the students and some of the responses that came out. And I tell you, I was just blown away by some of the answers. I I wish all of us could participate in this particular committee because it is that important. And I have a bunch of notes that I wrote, but I attended another meeting shortly after I left that one last night, and this morning I attended another. So I will either forward my notes to you, Ms. Hayes as president, or I will forward them to the whatever, and we'll talk about them next week if that's okay. But there's a lot. I just find this so equities, inclusivity, and diversity in education. And it's just so good. And how some of the kids don't feel as though they are a part of any group. Some kids only feel as though they are part of a group that is only part of their ethnicity. And surprisingly, a lot of white kids just feel as though they don't belong at all. So it was quite interesting. And I think this is information that really needs to be shared with not only with the board, but with the community. And I plan to do that. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna step in and make my committee report because it's going to tag on to Mr. Parker's, because the meeting that I went to was also the equity committee. And I'd reported previously about all the energy that I see coming out of that committee. And that became even more clear last night, where any number of our staff members reported on training programs that they had attended, and basically extra work that they were doing in order to gather information. And they even reported that it seems as if South Country is getting the reputation of being the leader in this effort on Long Island. And some of the people from other districts were asking them how they could do what we've done in such a short period of time. And I think that speaks volumes to the, again, the energy in the committee and the staff members who've been devoting so much effort to it. And it's very gratifying. Also, Mr. Parker referred to the meeting of students, and according to my notes, which are not as much as yours perhaps, I recall that there were maybe as many as 25 students who were part of this discussion group. And they're going to be reaching out and more discussion groups to get more input from the young people. But one of the common threads is for those who did feel like they belonged and felt connected, it was because of having a connection with a teacher. And, these are things that we kind of hear about and it's kind of assumed, but it's very important to have it confirmed by the young people who've benefited from this. So there was discussion about how to convey the information that had been gotten on the high school level and share it with the younger grades, so that the teachers of younger students will see what a huge impact they can have at an early age, so that by the time the students get to high school, hopefully they will have felt that connection and they will continue to have it. And I see Mr. Frankie nodding his head. I hope I've hit a nerve there, and that the high school students and also the staff members will continue to work on that. And so that's my report about what I've done for committee meetings. And Mr. Trent.
I just wanted to echo what you said, President Hayes. I also attended the equity committee meeting, and they really are pioneering in the area of equity and addressing the district's systemic issues. Actually, one of the suggestions that was made in the committee was providing our board meetings to be translated in Spanish for our community members. It is an amazing idea, and I hope that administration could look into that and kind of share some information about that. This morning, I had also attended Bellport Middle School's Black History Month Town Hall, where there were a handful of officers who were graduates of Bellport High School, and they, shared their experience and answered some of the adult questions. Um, in the meeting, the adults had to leave to provide a safe space for the students to communicate with the officers. But I hope to hear how that conversation went and some of the questions that were asked. But that's all I have for my report.
Thank you for bringing that up because I also was able to participate in the town hall to be a listener. And the officers that were part of the program, there were 2 male police officers, Black males who'd gone to Bellport High School. And then there were 2 female officers, one of whom addressed the kids in her military uniform because she's also active duty military. And I thought, as role models and as demonstrations of what's available to our young people, these 4 were really good examples. And this was the 3rd of the town halls that had been produced by the Equity Committee, and specifically through the high school. It's been Kai Watkins and who's been chairing these town halls. And the previous town halls included an anesthesiologist from Stony Brook. And then before that, there was Gal Mosby, who is a graduate of Bellport High School, who's currently an assistant district attorney in New York City. And again, examples of what can be available career-wise to people. And they recounted their paths and maybe not having been the most attentive students during high school, but then getting it together in college and then beyond. It was really interesting to listen to them. And I think the questions also from the young people, it gave them a good opportunity to have some exchange there. So we have Mr. Piccini. Do you have any?
Yeah, I do. I did want to talk
reports?
about the legislative committee a little bit. I know Cheryl addressed it. Just so the board's aware of what the strategy is in the short term. Budget's due from the governor April 1st, short 5 weeks. So what we had discussed was coming up with, and Ms. Costa is going to be a big help here, just really discussing what negative impacts may become our district without appropriate funding, and how we can, drill down on that information and specifics, put it into a brochure, document, flyer, et cetera, and elicit the help of our community and all of our stakeholders in and possibly doing some sort of a social media blast night or a digital communication night with our legislators to bring this information up so they hear from not just us on the legislative committee and the district, but the community at large, because it affects all of us in a lot of different ways. So I think I've seen this done in neighboring districts for many years. I think it could be impactful if we narrow down a time for a few hours in an evening. We arm our community with information on who to contact, how to contact them, and when to contact them. If we give them some talking points specific to, how this impacts our district. So I think that's a good short-term strategy, given the timeline that we have here. There's a lot to be concerned about. I know we talked about it. I'm sure we'll talk about it again tonight during the budget presentation. I'm really concerned now with some of the news this week about the federal stimulus bill may be in doubt for a number of different reasons. And I know we had talked about how impactful and how much needed the federal money is to our state, specifically for education. So while there was optimism a few days ago that the governor budgeted $6 billion and there's roughly $12 billion in proposed funding in this bill, I'm a little worried about the bill getting passed. So we'll have to keep an eye on Washington and what happens over the next couple of days. I did want to make a comment. I should have made it at the committee meeting, and we can maybe discuss this further down the road. But I do believe that we should, and I believe this may have been discussed. I may have been late to a meeting or whatever. I do think we need more people on this committee. I do think we need a greater representation of our community on this meeting. on this, excuse me, on this committee. It's mostly administration and 3 board members. I think we have 1 teacher. And I think it's giving us a lack of perspective on many issues. So I would hope that, you know, although it may not have time right now, it would be nice to have some representation from each building's PTA, possibly maybe some of our CSEA workers. You know, there's many different people can give us many different perspectives, and I think could definitely add quite a bit to this committee. So that
And
was it.
on the advisory committees to the board, there's a seat or 2 available to community members, which would be members of the community who do not have children in the school district and who are not employed by the district. So if anybody knows of a community member, have them send their name in to the clerk, and we'll see, you know, where that person might be a good fit for committee membership, because it's not just this committee that
Yeah, sure.
could use
I
community
guess
representation.
it kind of struck me after the meeting, you know, that it really was how few people were on the committee, I should say. And when you look at some of our other committees, we do have a nice representation of community members and stakeholders at large. So it's just something I think we should take up in the future. And I just wanted to get that comment on record.
Thank you.
I also did have one quick question for Dr. Gianni in his report in regards to middle school sports.
Mhm.
I think you just said that they're going to go right into fall sports and all winter sports are gone by the wayside. Is that what I heard?
Winter sports, no winter sports.
No winter sports. So
Yeah, the winter, as you may know, you athletic parents know the winter seasons generally are short seasons to begin with. And they rolled out just the one that was for the high school. And so the winter sports, winter 1 and winter 2 at the middle school is not occurring this year.
yeah, it's just to me, I just want to highlight my disappointment in Section 11 in these decisions, because it's almost like we are prioritizing the fall sports over everything else. I mean, people missed out. I would almost understand if they just picked up on the time of the year. You know, it's spring, so just go with spring sports. I can understand that, but to leapfrog the winter sports, and winter sports are very important to me, not because we're a basketball family, because I do love football as well, but you know, those are the indoor sports, and those are the kids that, you know, when there's nothing to do and there's no organization, it's kind of hard for them to find something to do. When weather's nice, the fall and the spring, kids can go out on their bike, they can go to a park and do things. Winter sports are incredibly important. And we have, I believe, at least 5 teams at the middle school. I know it's different seasons at the middle school, but you know, we fought hard many years ago to have additional sports teams to increase participation, because kids in middle school are so at risk. In my opinion, I think many people's opinion, it's a very delicate time in their lives, and I think they need to be active. So I just think it's important to highlight what a poor decision I personally think Section 11 made by not allowing winter sports in the middle school. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. And then we need our report from our student trustee, Jack Frankie.
Okay, thank you. So from celebrating Black History Month to a full return to sports, all the way to having a great success and attendance in our great building, February has been an amazing month so far for Bellport High School. The month of February is Black History Month. During this month, we celebrate and recognize the contributions and achievements of Black Americans, as well as present opportunities for people to learn about the effects of social injustice in our society. As others have already said, the Equity Committee has presented us with amazing presentations in town halls. Today, at our 3rd and final town hall, there were over 100 students and faculty members tuned in to listen and partake. It was awesome to hear everyone's story and have a casual conversation with all of these great people in our great American society. So as winter sports are starting to come to an end, I want to congratulate everyone on an amazing season. It was awesome to see a return to sports at Bellport High School. I myself partook, and I saw a bunch of my peers, so it was just great to see it come back. And as we move into our fall sports season in March, we will continue to do COVID testing for our high-risk sports, and we will continue to follow the guidance that Section 11 has provided us. If any of my peers are interested in playing a fall sport, which include football, boys and girls soccer, boys golf, boys and girls cross country, volleyball, and girls tennis, please head down to Mr. McIntyre's office during the school day or call into the school to inquire. If you want to get involved, you have the opportunity. Please do it. Today, Buckford High School congratulated 12 students with our Student of the Quarter presentation. These students were selected by our teachers for their achievement so far this year. The yearly Evening of Excellence is happening this year for our seniors. This virtual presentation awards seniors who have gotten a cumulative GPA of 93 or higher throughout their high school tenure. This event will be hosted on March 23rd, and all senior participants who meet the requirements will receive an invitation soon. And finishing off with some really great news, Buckford High School saw the most kids return to the building on Tuesday, with over 700 students making their return. So if this trend continues, we will hopefully see more students make their return into the in-person learning environment. And fingers crossed it will stay that way.
Thank you. I think we are down to guide to board meetings, and this is the public commentary section. And because we're doing things virtually, we've asked members of the community or members of the public who want to make a statement to the board to send those in to our clerk prior to noon on Wednesday today to be read in at the time of the board meeting. And I believe Ms. Chapletti is available to, I think there are at least two that I know of on the
Yes.
list. Okay.
Yes, I have two comments that they specifically asked that they be read at the board meeting.
And can I interrupt before you do that?
Sure.
We get email on a very regular basis from various parents and community members. Whenever it comes in and it's addressed to me, I make sure that it's shared with the board. So whatever content is in these emails, the entire board has access to it. There are some people who specifically said they wanted their letter read in as if it were a statement, like back in the days when we had people come up to a podium and have 3 minutes available to make a statement. So with these two that Ms. Chapletti has for tonight, we'll open up and you'll take care of presenting the public commentary. Thank you,
Sure.
sir.
You're welcome. So the first comment is from Serena Waldron Walker. Hello, my name is Serena Waldron Walker, and I'm currently an 11th grader at Belport High School. I am aware that the extra help Wednesdays we have are in jeopardy of being taken away. So I just wanted to point out how I feel that the extra help days are very beneficial to all the students, especially the remote students like myself, who don't really have the opportunity to ask the teachers for help when we need it. Though I know there is extra help after school, but there's complications that come with it. For example, not all teachers have extra help, and the teachers that do might have extra help on the same days. So a student who needs help in both of those classes will have to choose which class to prioritize. Therefore, the Wednesday extra help days are way better because they fix those problems by letting the student have a full day of extra help where they can get help in all of their classes. I really hope that we don't take them away because I do believe they will negatively affect most student grades, including mine. Thank you for taking the time to read this. And the second comment is from Sarah Colon. Remote Wednesdays are essential for those in all grades K to 12 that chose the remote learning option. As we know, families that kept their children home did so for a variety of reasons that do not need to be discussed, as we are very much still in a pandemic. These families feel that this is the safest option for their children during this unprecedented time. With that being said, remote Wednesdays are essential for students that are home to connect with their classroom teacher and get any extra help they may need. It provides those students who have no choice to be home with an equal educational opportunity to learn with their teacher or teachers. We have over 900 students on full remote learning. I feel that if the district were to remove remote Wednesdays from the schedule, that it would disproportionately affect the population of remote students who again have no choice but to remain home for whatever reason. If the district were to remove the remote Wednesdays, then the current model at whichever level it may be would have to change. For example, my son is fifth grade on option 1. He does independent work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with remote Wednesdays as the day to connect with his classroom teacher. Option 2 at the K-5 level, which was a switch to all remote teachers, would not have worked and would still not work for him. He is excelling in the current model, and remote Wednesdays allows his teacher to touch base with him for small group work with other classmates, reading level assessments, or anything else he may need, or the teacher may want to do, and also individual meets for whatever he may be struggling with. I can only individually speak on this in regards to my son, but he does do a full day of new work on Wednesdays, but still it allows for extra help should he need it. I can take an educated guess that many other students and families at all grade levels feel the same way. Also, remote Wednesdays have given teachers the time to prepare for all models of teaching, whether it is for in-person or remote. Many parents see the benefit of remote Wednesdays, and I have heard that some students also feel it is a very beneficial day. I understand that we all want normalcy back. I myself long for the day that my son can be back in a classroom with his teachers and his peers, but due to his brother having severe medical issues, it is safer to keep them both home at this time. I do not feel any parent in this district does not want to go back to normal, but we have to remember this is not a normal time. This is a worldwide pandemic. There are some schools that only do 2 days or 3, and yes, some have 5 days. However, we are 6 months into the school year. Many of us have gotten the groove, and changing it again or making things harder is insanity at this point in the year. We should be happy that we have successfully brought the students back 4 days, but we should also remember that one single day for those remote teachers. Instead of trying to switch up everything we are doing currently, maybe we should focus on how we improve this plan for next year. Why? Because it stands right now. Children under 16 may not be able to be vaccinated until 2022. Sure, we do not know what lies ahead, but we should prepare for whatever that may be. I hope normalcy returns, but planning is the only smart option. I am respectfully asking the district to seriously consider these points in making a decision whether to keep remote Wednesdays or to not. We have to think about all students in our district, not just the in-person students during this unprecedented time. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. And that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think we've completed the public commentary section, and now we're ready for the budget presentation, Dr. Gianni. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yes, we are ready for the next the item. Our first item for discussion this evening, as you mentioned, is our third in a series of our budget presentation. It is a presentation on codes 1,000, 5,000, and 9,000, and making the presentation will be Ms. Costa. So I'm going to turn over the screen to Ms. Costa, and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Gianni and the Board of Education. I'll share my screen now. Are we seeing the presentation properly, the first page of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So welcome everybody tonight. As Dr. Gianni said, this is the third budget presentation for the district during this budget development cycle. And tonight we'll begin to speak about expenditures, and we'll talk about expenditures in 3 different functional areas of the district: administration, which is the 1,000 codes, transportation, the 5,000 codes, and unallocated codes in the 9,000 range. And we'll talk in more detail about them as we go through. Again, at the beginning of this season, we developed a budget development calendar, keeps us on track, lets us all see where we are. Right now, at our January 20th meeting, everything in red is our board meetings. We looked at our financial condition. At our last meeting, we took a look at revenues, the tax levy calculation, and we unpacked the executive's state aid runs for school districts in our last meeting. So this meeting is our first meeting where we're going to begin to speak about doing expenditure review. And we're going to look at 3 different expenditure areas today. Again, administration, transportation, unallocated budget codes. What will we cover today? Again, these are the 3 functional areas that we're going to cover: administration, transportation, and unallocated budget codes. Unallocated budget codes fall really in 3 broad categories: benefits, debt service, and interfund transfers. And what does the term unallocated mean? It just really means that it cannot be specifically applied to any of the other areas. And later on, when we do our budget hearing, the last meeting we have in the budget development process, we're required to break out all the unallocated costs by functional area. For example, we would have to break out health insurance related to, if it's a teacher, in the instructional part of the budget. If it was for myself, it would be in the administrative part of the budget. But that happens in the very last presentation through this cycle. And again, to ground us, here's our triangle that lets us see that the base of all of our conversations is our educational program and our board priorities, and we're the district heads. Last meeting, we spoke about revenues. This meeting, we're going to start to talk about expenditures. And again, the takeaway pieces are they all have to be balanced to have a strong program. And to reiterate some of our conversations from last week, how important it is to have predictable revenues, because without them, we don't have a strong educational program, and we actually will not have expenditures that'll be consistent over the years. So we'll continue to let us all know that having stability in this triangle is very important. So here we're going to start. The first area that we're going to look at of the 3 functional areas is administration. And administration covers these areas: the Board of Education, district clerk, the annual budget vote and trustee election. And the largest area is central administration. And all these areas fall under central administration: superintendent, business, audit, purchasing, legal, human resources, public relations, facilities, which is the largest area, mail, administrative technology, insurance, which is insurance on property and casualty insurance, not benefits, and association dues and BOCES fees. That is what's included in the administration section of the budget. First area, Board of Education. There's no change from the prior year in the 21-22 proposed budget. District clerk area. The only change in the district clerk area is for contractual increases in employee compensation. In the annual budget and trustee election section, the only change is in the advertising line you'll see, and that's really because legal notices are now required to be published in English and Spanish, and that is an additional cost to the district. So starting last year, all legal notices are published in both languages, and this is recognizing that change. In the superintendent's code, the only change to the superintendent's area were contractual obligations. In the business area, the only change to this area is in contractual obligations, both to employees and BOCES. You'll see we have changes in those lines, but those are contractual obligations. Their costs increase for their employees the same as our costs increase for our employees. In the audit section of the budget, this is the area of the budget. We have 3 different organizations auditing us, and in any given year are the external auditors, the internal auditors, and the claims auditor. The internal and the claims auditor are an offshoot of the Roslyn school scandal, and we are still required to do these, and we still do them. And the cost of these are required to be RFP'd every 5 years for the external and the internal. And these rates are based on the RFPs that these organizations had responded to. In the treasury and purchasing area, the increases here are just employee compensation and their contractual increases. In the legal area, there's a minor increase in this section of the budget for 1.8%, acknowledging that in 1920 and 2021, there was a 0% increase in these line items. And this is recognizing that while we do not have not settled contracts, we are recognizing there may be an increase in this area. In human resources, there are increases for contractual employee compensation, but there's also an increase you'll see in line contractual services to $17,000. That recognizes the fact that we're required to do annual employee gang threat training now as a result of some recent some recent settlements in the district. So we did training recently, we're required to do it for the next 3 years. Public relations. This is just increases for the printing of our school calendar, which has stayed the same, and BOCES increase for our public relations firm. And that's represented here. Facilities, operations, and maintenance. That is the largest administrative section of the budget. It has been impacted by the pandemic, obviously, for PPE, cleaning, and other items. I'll go through areas that had the largest increase. The security line has increased, and it really just represents the current staffing levels we have at the building at the current rates that those staff are paid. And some additional, they spend time not just during the school day, they also work on other events. So that represents that. Buildings and Grounds is asking for the purchase of a ball field groomer to help with field maintenance, and that is built into the budget right now. Contractual services line is the largest line in the budget. After Mr. Clements and I looking at this in great detail, we decided to hold the line on this budget line. We're going to talk in the next slide a little more in detail what gets paid out of here, but there are some items to note. There are some items that could affect this line in the future. In the current proposal by the governor, he is proposing annual lead testing. Currently, it's only once every 5 years. And he's also proposing a reduction in the allowable parts per million from 15 to 5 parts per million. If this actually goes through the legislature and it makes it into law, it'll have a significant increase in this line. Right now, we don't know the outcome of that. And this is the area of the facilities budget where we've seen the largest increase. This is related to PPE and cleaning efforts of the district. There is a new line, if you notice, COVID-19 line for $300,000. We'll talk on the next slide, really what we buy from that line, that's really related to all the PPE items that we now have in the classrooms and in all of our buildings. And the custodial supply line went from 325 to 350, that really recognizes the increased cost of some of the products we're using. Some of the products now that we require to use that are known to kill the coronavirus are more expensive than other products that we used to use, and that is reflecting that change here. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what's bought. Out of that $1.6 million budget line, the largest in the facilities budget, these are some of the things that happen out of that line item: abatement, all of our maintenance in our buildings, HVAC repairs, lead testing, lock services, anything that happens in the district that just shows up, a burst pipe, they really are handled through this budget code. So that budget code sees varied items from year to year as to what flows through there, but it really handles a lot of contractual services. And in the line that's new, the $300,000 COVID supply line, these are the items that we're buying out of that line: machinery for the staff to disinfect the classrooms, cups, dispensers, gloves, gowns, sanitizer, many more HVAC filters. We change the filters much more often now as a result of COVID-19, masks, towels, shields, thermometers. Those are examples of all the things that we're buying out of that code. And again, this is just the ball field groomer is new to the equipment line for facilities. Next area, the mail area. The only increase, I went too fast, I apologize. The mail increase is affected by contractual increases for salaries and the increase in mailing costs that we have had, some of it related to last year's election, some of it related to increase in postage costs that have gone through from last year to this year for the district. So that's what's reflected here. Administrative technology. This is another area of the district where we have seen some increases. Here are some of the increases in this area. In the middle of the page, you'll see contractual and other. That's for $25,000. That's a new line to reflect security camera repairs and replacements needed throughout the district. Security cameras were installed with the last bond issue, and some of them are needing repair and replacement, and this line is going to start addressing those needs throughout the district. And probably you'll see the BOCES line is the largest increase here. That BOCES line is increased because of all of the software and mobile hotspot needs of the district now that we are doing remote learning. So a lot of the software needs were new as a result of the pandemic. We were doing new things, and these are examples of some of the new software that was purchased and has made its way into the curriculum. And the mobile hotspots, we anticipate needing those hotspots in the future. So that's built into there. And the last line item here that saw an increase is the supplies line. Out of this line, the IT department purchases the supplies to fix Chromebooks and laptops and repair them in-house. Many districts send that out. We actually know that we save a lot of money by fixing them ourselves. Our techs in the buildings are trained and our core staff is trained, and we get back Chromebooks and laptops and we fix them in-house. And because we have so many more out there with students, obviously we have a one-to-one initiative district-wide, there are a lot more parts that are needed to fix those going forward. Insurance for property and casualty, NYSER is estimating a 9% increase. Right now, they are reviewing claims history specific to South Country schools, and they're also experiencing the pool experience overall, because NYSER is pooled insurance. We are pooled with lots of other school districts. So based on how all the school districts that are part of that pool and our own personal experience will determine this final rate. So I do expect to see a change here. I'm just waiting for final notice from NYSER on this. Association dues is really for school boards, and we historically see approximately a 2% increase in these dues each year, and that's built into the budget. Next area is BOCES admin and facilities fees. BOCES, as a component, we are a component district of BOCES. We are charged our proportionate share of all their administrative and facilities fees. And this represents a 2% increase here, and we're waiting for final word on them. We eventually will get an exact number here when they finish apportioning it to all the schools, and we will work that through the budget as we go through the process. Next of the three functional areas we're going to look at is transportation. This section of the budget includes, I'll show you, this is kind of the areas that they're broke down from a financial perspective, but I'm going to actually describe what it includes. It includes transportation of our students for the regular school day and for extracurricular activities. It also includes transportation to all of our school buildings, as well as any children who have been placed by our Committee of Special Education at another school. So we transport all those students. And lastly, it also covers transportation for any students in our district that are parentally placed in schools that are within the board limits of 25 miles. We will transport up to 25 miles because that is the Board of Education policy. So for example, students that go to St. Anthony's School that are residents here but go to St. Anthony's, we transport them to that school. So this area includes all of that. But these are the 5 functional areas we're required to break it down financially this way. This is the admin cost of transportation, and the increases here are just contractual employee increases. The lease, we lease a maintenance yard. It falls under the transportation section of our budget, and it's for our maintenance staff here in the district. We there are vehicles there, and we operate out of that maintenance yard, and this is the lease on that yard. And this is the transportation costs for all the transportation of our students. This is our big buses and our vans, and you may remember that last year, our vans were out to RFP, and the year before that, our big buses were out to RFP. This represents the current routing that we have, plus anticipated late buses last year. We don't have next year. We don't have all of our late buses running this year, and this reflects the rates that we received for those 5-year RFPs. Oh, and additional coverage, just so everyone knows, additional coverage is additional runs we do midday in the district on testing days. So when we send students home from the high school in the middle of the day, we have to run extra busing, and that covers those midday runs that happen a number of times during the year. And this is our athletic and field trip busing, as well as BOCES busing. You may notice that the athletic, the first line has increased. This is a placeholder because we are out to RFP for the athletic and field trip transportation. That is not handled by town. Town does all of our big bus and our van transportation. This is handled by Coastal. Coastal is June 30th of this year will be the end of their 5-year RFP. We went to them and asked them if they would extend their rates. The state education department publishes CPI for transportation. If they would agree to that rate only, we could extend the contract with them another year, but they have denied letting us extend at that rate. So we are out to RFP and expecting results in the next month, and we will have a better number here. And now we talk about the unallocated budget codes. The unallocated budget codes, as we said, don't exclusively belong to one of the three functional areas. And the three functional areas, as defined by the state, are administration, instructional, and capital. We will later allocate these at the very last budget meeting, at the budget hearing. But this covers retirement, local and teachers for our employees. This covers Social Security, workers' compensation, and this covers benefit insurances, which are these: health, dental, life, and disability, unemployment, payouts to employees, which encompass terminal leave payouts and deferral separations. We'll talk about that in more detail as we get to those pages. Covers debt service payments that were obligated for past bonds and for our annual tax anticipation note borrowing. So first area, the retirement area, is two retirement systems. Our certificated staff fall under the teacher's retirement system, and our classified employees are in the ERS retirement system. In the ERS retirement system, there's currently 6 tiers. The rate tiers increased approximately 12% from last fiscal year to this year. ERS sets those rates. Those rates are going to be good for the state fiscal year, which ends on March 31st, 2022. So those rates have already been set. And the only rates we don't know is the rates for the last quarter of our school year next year, because their rates are only set through March 31st, 2022. So we have to always project what the last quarter would be. But there is a 12% increase approximately built into all 6 tiers for ERS, and that's been reflected here. And the TRS retirement system just announced their final rate about a week or two ago. They've announced a rate increase from 9.53% to 9.8%. And the interesting piece that happens with the retirement system budgeting is that it compounds. A rate increase is also applied to increasing salaries to employees. So a rate increase in and of itself would be an increase, even if we had no increase to any retirement system rates from one year to the next. These lines would increase because people's salaries are increasing, and retirement system rates are the percentage that they charge times the employee's salary. So every time the employee gets an increase, even if there was no increase to the rate, it costs us more money. And then when you add increasing rates to that, it's a compounding effect. So the effect of the increase for TRS from 9.8 to 9.53, when applied to our teachers' increases in salaries, is about a 6.4% increase to this line item for the district. Social Security, workers' compensation, life insurance, and unemployment. We'll speak about these again together. Again, like retirement system costs, Social Security costs are based on salaries. 7.65% of all salaries we pay. The district has to match and pay Social Security on all those wages, and that's represented here. And the other item that's a notable increase is unemployment. And I know we've spoken a bit about this, the board, over this last year, there's been a lot of fluidity in unemployment. I'm going to give us all an idea of where we stand right now. At the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government, as part of the CARES Act, agreed to cover 50% of all unemployment claims for all states in the union. And we are self-insured for unemployment. And all that means is that the state processes our unemployment claims like they would do for anybody, even for organizations that are not self-insured. And they just send us the bill and say, we process these claims, you owe us this money back. And that's how being self-insured works. But basically what happened is at the beginning of the pandemic, the federal government said, we'll cover 50% of the costs for all states in the union. And that's how it worked. And then there was a second stimulus package passed just recently in the last month, 6 or 8 weeks. That second stimulus pact said that the federal government would cover 100% of the claims for all states in the union from March of last year till March of this year. So right now, we are in a position where we just got news that 100% of our claims will be paid by the federal government. What does that mean? Our claims are currently tracking at a cost of $400,000 per year, because the board may remember that we kept saying that the cost would be $200,000 a year. That's because half of it was covered by the federal government initially. So we're tracking about $400,000 a year. So this line becomes a very difficult line item to budget for next year because we're trending at $400,000 a year compared to the past where our expenses were $25,000 to $50,000 a year. And I don't know past March 31st of this year if the federal government will provide any relief to states. And so right now we're budgeting about 50% of what our current claim level is operating at. But this is a line item in our budget where we have a reserve. And if this ends up not being enough money in the 21-22 year, we can have a conversation about that. It's very fluid in Washington. And one of the things that seems imminent, though, is that in this stimulus package that is being discussed right now, the 1.9 trillion that's not passed yet, it seems imminent that they will yet extend again the eligibility for employees to have unemployment. They will continue extending that, although there is no reference in extending them contributing to the costs anymore. So this is a difficult line. We'll keep, I will keep the board posted as this plays out. But here we are budgeting approximately half of what our costs are trending. Insurances, health, dental, and disability. One of the largest areas in the unallocated code is, of course, health insurance. They're all relatively large, but health being the largest. Health insurance increase was set by the Suffolk Schools Employees Health Plan at 4% for next year, or $735,000. That cost is worked into this budget, and there's minor increases in dental rates and for next year, and that's what this section represents. Payouts. This area of the budget, you'll see that the last two line items are really where the changes are in terminal leave payouts and deferral paybacks. I'll speak about them one at a time. The terminal leave payouts have been in our budget, and they represent when employees separate from the district, usually when they retire, they get paid out their accumulated leave days, sick and vacation, out of this line item. This line item has been trending in the $1.2 million and higher range for the last couple of years. We've been budgeting, as you see last year, $450, the year before that, $300. Of course, we're always paying what the actual costs are. And the board may remember at the end of every school year, we go back to the board and tell them the actual costs were, for example, 1.2 million. We need to use the reserve and pay those costs with the reserve. And we've been doing that every year for as far back as we can look. What this represents is, after speaking to Cullen and Danowski and our auditors, we really should be budgeting what we think the actuals may be, which we believe them to be $1.2 million next year, based on what our past has been, and then using the reserve in the revenues to cover that, like we've been doing it, but now we're just doing it at the front end of the cycle during the budget development season instead of later on in the year. So that's what that line represents. And then the deferral payback line is a new line, and that is born because last year a contract was settled with the BTA, and that contract had them defer one paycheck. That one paycheck deferral was about $1.7 million. And in the wording of that MOA, when in about 4 years from now, we begin paying back certain people in that bargaining unit, or they get paid back when they retire or separate from service. So this line item addresses that when staff separates from service, whether retiring or they terminate to go work somewhere else, we owe them that money back. And we have to address that. We owe that money back per the MOA no matter what. Now we just have to address people that who leave us without us knowing, and that's this new line item in the budget. Debt service and transfers. Debt service is basically the bond issues from the past that we owe money for. These are the current payments due next year, the principal and interest on those bond payments. And the only other item in this section to note is really the food transfer to food service. That line has been increased to $300,000, and that's really because in our last two audit cycles, the school lunch program last year lost $326,000. And in the year before that, it lost $350,000. That money has been supported by the general fund, you see from years past, but we need to up it for what actual losses are going to be. And this year we are anticipating a similar loss because without the sale of a la carte items, which is really where a lot of money is made up in some of the program, the rest of the program is very thin and very small margins. We anticipate a similar loss in this current year. And obviously going forward, that seems to be the trend in our loss. So that is the line item that why you see that increase. So where are we? Now we're going to look at district. This is our first glance of projected expenditures across all areas of the budget.
Mr. Costa,
Yes,
might I ask you a question before you go on because I'll get lost otherwise?
sure,
Okay, go back. I believe it's 2 slides.
sure. This one?
That's it.
Okay,
Now, line 3.
yes,
Okay, would you go that once more for me, please?
of course. That line represents payments to employees when they separate from service for the district for their sick and vacation time. Those are contractual collective bargaining agreements of what we pay them. So when you separate some bargaining units, they're all slightly different, but they allow you to accumulate over the course of a career a certain number of sick days. And if you're in different bargaining units, you get vacation days. And those days are paid out to you when you leave the district. They get
So
reported.
they're paid out once you leave the district. Is that correct?
You leave service, yes.
Okay.
Really, it happens when you retire, Mr. Parker. So when you retire, the collective bargaining agreement made provisions for you to keep certain amount of sick time and accumulate up to a certain level. And then when you retire, the bargaining contract says you get paid out at a rate that the bargaining unit discusses. And that's different per bargaining unit, but each bargaining unit has a calculation on the number of days you can accumulate up to and the rate at which you paid for those days.
Now the difference between that line 3 and line 4.
And line 4 is last year, when we settled our BTA contract, we negotiated a 1 check deferral. Like they gave us and said, we'll give up 1 check, but that 1 check, the MOA was written that starting 4 years from now, a slice of those employees will start getting paid. It's written and it's a formula. Those that are on step 13, it's written in very specifically. But it also says in that MOA agreement, if someone leaves the district who had that deferral taken from them of their own volition, if they leave the district, they're entitled to that money that was deferred. This addresses, for example, we have 2 principals, not only the teachers settled this deferral, but so did the administrators, the principals and directors. So we have 2 principals retiring this year. They had their paycheck deferred in this current school year that we're sitting in. And at the end of the year, we'll have to pay them that deferral money that we deferred during this year because it's due to them.
And why does a person have their payments deferred?
That's just how the contract was settled. So that's what represents those 2 lines. So those are each of the areas that we spoke about. Now we're going to take a bird's eye view of where all the expenditures fall for all the areas of the district. And right now, the proposed increase in expenditures over 2021 is 6.2% or $8.6 million. And this represents very high level in administration, curriculum, which is curriculum instruction, transportation, and the benefits area. We have spoken about tonight administration, transportation, and the benefits and debt service area. Next meeting, we will talk in detail about the curriculum and instruction area, the $77 million line item there. We will talk at our next meeting in detail of all of that. But this, where are we? So this represents requests by all of the building principals that have been put in, and this will change throughout the process. This is where we start, and this is not where we will finish. This is the beginning of us, developing, as we talk about our triangle, a balanced budget. So what's our challenge? Here is a picture of where we are. Again, we continue to include 2021 just because of all of the changes that have occurred and it still occurred during this year. It's important we talk about 21, 22 and 2021 at the same time. So for 21, 22, we are currently projecting a $16.9 million budget gap. That represents, we know of revenues of 130 million. And we in our last slide, we're projecting expenditures of 147 million. This does not take into account the designation of fund balance or reserves that the board, we will continue to talk about through this process. So what's changed? That's $16.9 million. What's changed? This slide looks at categorically what's changed. So expenditure increases that you're seeing up above. If you remember, I said that the budget increased by 6.2% or 8.6 million. These are all of the $8.6 million increases by category. So benefits increased 2.7. Collective bargaining agreement changes are 2.6 million for everyone in the district. Transportation, 852,000. BOCES, 610. Equipment, 569. Special ed, 400,000. Facilities, 374. Most of that is PPE related items that we talked about tonight. Textbooks and other contractual increases sprinkled throughout the budget. Those are the $8.6 million in the expenditure line items. But what else has changed? Because the gap is 16.9. On the revenue side, this is the change in revenues. That's also contributes to the gap. Our tax levy limit, we only increased by $908,000. That is the limit that the calculation produced. But we also have miscellaneous revenue declined from last year to this year. That miscellaneous revenue is related pretty much exclusively to the deferral that we negotiated with the two bargaining units. That revenue is not here this year. It was there last year. And the state aid declined from the original budget of 2021 to the governor's budget of $1.7 million. So those, if you add all of those items up, all the expenditure increases and all the revenue changes, and with that, you take into account the fund balance and the reserves we appropriated last year, comes to exactly $16.9 million. That's our gap.
So go back to the miscellaneous revenue for a
Sure.
minute. That's $1.8 million.
When we negotiated a deferral, it was for 1 year. So that money was ours last year, which is the year we're sitting in. It was our money for 2021, but that deferral did not replicate itself. So we need to come up with that money from last year, next year.
Shit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry.
That's related to that negotiation last year. And the state aid decline, if you actually notice, I'm going to go back a couple of slides, just here it is right here. If you actually notice that the state aid, this was our original budget and state aid was 58 million and we're now at 56 million. This, while the state aid run from the governor showed us at a $200,000 increase. He's showing us a $200,000 increase on this number. This number, remember, represents that we were closed for a quarter of the year and we didn't have all the expenses.
We didn't have, right.
So if you take $1.9 million that we will believe we will be short in revenue this year that we're sitting in, and you marry that with the $200,000 increase for 21-22, it comes to the $1.7 million loss from last year that we budgeted to this year that we're at. So the difference between 58 million and 56 is this $1.7 million reduction in state aid from 2021's budget to 21-22 governor's proposal. So that's kind of where we stand. And the last layer to get to the 16.9 million is that we have not decided on fund balance and reserves. But if we use the exact same $5,550,000 of reserves and fund balance from last year, and you added all these expenditure increases and all the revenue changes and the $5,550,000 in fund balance and reserves, you come to exactly $16.9 million gap.
So why would we use the same $5 million?
You may, but that's a decision we make later on through the process, Mr. Parker. The board makes the decision on how much reserves and fund balance they would like to use. So if we decided today, if the board decided today to use the same amount, our $16.9 million gap would be less by $5,550,000. We just haven't made that decision yet. So Other items that we always talk about every budget development cycle is these budget considerations, which we're waiting for legislative runs. Very important what's happening on the federal government side this year for the first time also. We always talk about unfunded mandates. This year, I think it's been less talked about than in years past, but they're still there, all these unfunded mandates. All the PPE and COVID items that we've had to produce are unfunded mandates. We have to provide that, and there's been no funding to support those items. If you actually remember in the 2021 budget, the CARES Act money was not a supplement to our budget, it was supplanted. And by being supplanted, it basically means we had to pay for all that ourselves. They just took away their obligation from the state. So those are real needs. And we know that we will have increasing and changing student needs. We just know that to be true, and we'll see how that evolves. And we know PPE and security and facilities is an issue. And you'll see throughout the budget process, we're continuing to do our ESSA and transparency alignment. But what's the big picture for us? So I thought a visual would work for our big picture. Here is our school budget. This is our expenditures on the left, our revenues on the right. This is the piece that we really have to advocate for as we move forward. And what are specifics that we can advocate for? On the state aid side, we really need to be advocating that federal aid should be supplementing our budgets and not supplanting our budgets, which is what we're all worried about in public education, about the cliff. And if you notice, now that you dig down into the governor's proposal and you really compare it to what's happened, many people could say we have a reduction in state aid from last year, because the reason why it looks like we have a slight increase, we were closed a quarter of the year. And we're not going to get some of that state aid for transportation and others, but really it's a loss from how we built our budget last year. So we should be advocating for what we know would hurt us: no service aid from the governor, full funding of foundation aid, and that Long Island gets its equitable share as a region of the state that has the largest changes in student need and student makeup is happening on Long Island. So that's where we can advocate on the state aid side. And on the tax levy side, as we spoke about in our last meeting, 2% is currently the ceiling. And we really should be advocating that 2% should be the floor. You remember last meeting, our current rate is 1.23%. If it was 2%, we would have had $500, I believe, and $30,000 more in revenue. That's $530,000 that we don't have for our program that we are going to address. We should be advocating for full STAR commitments, and that all PPE or COVID-related items should be excluded from the tax levy, and we should be able to take care of that so that our students' needs are also met. So that's a big picture and a visual. And here we are meeting-wise. We've had 3 meetings. Tonight was tonight's meeting. Our next meeting, we will talk in detail about that $77 million in curriculum instruction for the district. We have 4 meetings after that, and all of it culminates with our budget vote and our trustee election on May 18th. Okay, and that's all. I will stop sharing 1 second.
Questions for Ms. Costa?
Mr. Trent?
I have a comment. I was glad to see you're next to the last slide where you've broken down the things to advocate for, because that gives a roadmap to our legislative committee, Ms. Felice, Mr. Puccini, and Mr. Parker, to keep an eye on what is being advocated statewide, to make sure that these needs that are particular to us are covered within the legislative activities of the bigger school board groups. So thank you for outlining it that way.
You're welcome.
Ms. Costa, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Trent?
Do you by any chance offhand know how much money the district spends to transport students to schools outside of our district? Well, I guess they're within our district, but outside of our schools.
I don't know it off the top of my head. I can get it for you, but just as a little background, when we transport to other schools, those runs are built into runs that we have. So we could really be transporting our own kids and also transporting those kids also on a similar bus. It doesn't always happen like that, but of course we maximize routing to minimize costs, so that if we have a run or school that starts late in the day, they might make a high school run in the morning, and they might go over to another school that starts at 9:15 because they finished their high school run at 7:15 in the morning. So it would have to be, we could break it out and we could come up with that information, but it's going to take a little bit of work, and I'll do that.
Well, do you think it's a lot, like a good deal of money, or?
Yes, of course.
Sure, we transport to a great number of,
Yes.
schools as a result of private schools, parochial schools, and special education needs. All of them are required, though. It's not something that you can say, let's reduce.
Well,
Can I add to that though, Dr. Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, we go further than what's required by law.
We go 25, we go 25 miles.
And
The
10 miles
requirement-
is the limit.
The requirement's 15, yes.
And just a little history lesson, there's a large number of private school families in our district. There's a coalition, which I believe is up to 800 or 900 families that come out in support of our budget because we go above and beyond and transport to that 25-mile limit. So that's just a little bit of information that may be beneficial.
So would the board like us to provide that info in terms of the amount? Because it is a,
I was just curious if
Okay.
it was, if we transport a lot of students or we spend a lot of money. That's what I wanted to.
okay, thank you.
Ms.
Any
Fuller?
other questions?
I would like
Ms.
to know,
Beth?
I'm sorry, I would like to know the number of private school students we have currently.
That's
in the
an
community.
easy, that's an easy.
That's easy, right?
Yeah.
Is there any way to see the trend, whether that's going up or down? Or do we know what like the last three numbers were? And if it's work, we can do it outside the budget season, but.
We can take a look at it. It shouldn't be too hard. I think it's relatively stable.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ancona?
Ms. Costa, I have a question. Are we in a lease with that storage space for the maintenance yard, and do we really need it? Don't we have enough property to be storing stuff here to save 50 grand?
We are in a lease with the maintenance yard. And while we do have property, we don't have a garage for storage or to work on the vehicles. So we both store and work on our vehicles in that garage, which has a lift. Our people actually do a lot of our vehicle maintenance, which saves the district a great deal of money. We don't have to send it out. So while we do have plenty of property, we have no structures that we would be able to do what we're doing over there.
And just out of curiosity, when is that lease up?
I'm not sure. Ms. Costa, do you know?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Thought I saw Ms. Felice's hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Costa. Great presentation as always. And just to echo the president's comments about, thank you for the direction for the legislative committee. That's exactly what we were speaking about at our meeting. And you came through in doing just that. So thank you. I had a quick question about the election, because the election came up at the legislative committee meeting and the cost of it. So the slide that you had up for the annual budget and trustee election, you're showing as the 1920 year that we spend 47,5, and that we're projecting going up to 49.8. Is that inclusive of the cost for the district-wide absentee mailing?
Mailing is in the mail code. It's not in the election code. So a number of slides later, the mail code, it's its own functional area. I'm trying to get there on my screen. That area was increased for the additional postage and requirements of the district.
So the cost, because we asked for that information too for the legislative committee, so we'll be taking another look at that.
Yes.
So it's both the 47,000 or the 48,000 plus the cost of actual mailing to and from.
Correct.
Right. All right. So maybe you can just dig that out and, oh, there it is now. Okay, I see it now. So does it separate out? No, it doesn't separate out just for the election.
we have a meter system, so you put money on the postage meter and you run all mail through it for the district. So, or we can identify the number of pieces and come up and extrapolate the cost. We can do that, but the meter is 1 meter. That's why it's one line item.
Okay, I understand. All right, so if you could extrapolate out the cost for the mailing, since it was, that would be helpful.
Sure.
All right. And then the insurance costs, while insurance costs is a necessary part of business, I'm talking about health insurance benefit wise for our employees. It's true that the increase for, I think you quoted as 4% was going to be the projection for the health increase, is a considerable savings to the district because of the consortium that we are in and that we're not buying private insurance. Is that safe? And do we know what the percentage is for the, say the Kaiser family? They usually do a projection of what health insurance plan costs increase are going to be. And they usually run in the 8, 9, 10% increase. So 4% increase is pretty significant.
Yes, as a trustee of that plan, actuarially, we go over what the plan's trending and what we're going to do, but we have the unique advantage of being able to also weave in some of the constraints we have as public entities and raising revenues. So sometimes not sometimes, we made decisions this year as a trustee of that plan that a palatable increase that may make us look at minor plan changes in the future so that we could smooth out what would be, they were recommending a much higher increase to the plan. And as trustees, we came up with some methods with which we could smooth that out. And that's where we ended up at 4%, Ms. Felice.
Okay. That's been communicated with the bargaining units, or is that something that's yet to roll out?
I don't think we've told them that because the rate increases for the SSEHP plan are effective school year based, so 7/1. So we usually roll that out closer to the end of the school year.
Okay, keep us up to date as to what that actually turns out to be.
Sure, it's finalized. It's 4%. All rate buckets, family, individual, and the Medicare buckets will go up exactly 4%.
No, I'm talking about the changes that you're going to make to realize, to keep it at the 4%.
Oh, sure.
Okay, that was that. And then for the staff retirement system, we have, our civilian employees, and then the education employees have 2 separate retirement plans. So the TRS is where the teachers and the teachers' aides come out of?
Correct.
Does administration come out of that code as well, come out of that retirement as well?
If they're certificated, yes. So myself, Dr. Gianni, central administration, but Mr. Clements, who's, the head of our facilities, he would come out as the ERS system.
Right, okay, understood. And so therefore the vacation sick time payout would go accordingly to what retirement system they're in? Or is that something
Like the bargaining agreement?
That goes strictly by the bargaining agreement? Okay. I think that was it. Oh, self-insurance with our life insurance policy. Are we self-insured on the life insurance?
No.
Policies? No, so we buy a plan.
Correct.
That's only for why our employees are active.
Yes, I do believe they have the option to purchase it individually when they retire, but at no cost to the district.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have one question about the reserves that are set aside for the sick leave and vacation pay that's due upon termination by retirement.
Yes.
The number that you have in there, that would be based upon every single possible person who could retire or leave this year? Or does it have an anticipation of what percent of our staff population would be retiring each year?
It's the second option that you described. It's the history and the trend of the number of people that retire each year and the payouts that they receive.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Costa.
Welcome. Thank you all.
Very good, Ms. Costa.
And move on to the next item, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Our next item for discussion this evening is the district's participation in the county's school bus stop arm enforcement program. The Stop Arm Enforcement Program is a county-wide program aimed at the enforcement of motorists stopping and not passing stop school buses. The Stop Arm program is authorized under New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law 1174A. If approved, stop arm cameras will be installed on our school buses, and these cameras will take a picture of motorists who illegally pass stopped school buses. I'm told the program would run similarly to the red light camera program through the county. In addition, and at no cost to the district, this program includes an upgrade of our internal bus cameras to a cloud-based system that will provide a more timely and efficient retrieval of videos. That's real important because we do utilize those videos for contact tracing, as well as reviewing student behavior on the school bus. Administration recommends of approval of this agreement. It has also been reviewed by District Council, and I offer this for the board's discussion and consideration.
Well, let's have a motion to get it on the table, and then we'll have hands racing. I thought Ms. Ancona first and a second by Ms. Felice. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions or discussions?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Trent.
John, did you say that we got all the issues worked out with the student surveillance?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my question was on that topic as well. Was council able to look at this agreement and verify that we don't need to be concerned about facial recognition type issues for the data that's going to be stored in the cloud? Do we have control over that? Is it being limited?
I'll let council respond, but I do know they marked up the agreement, which is before you this evening. But I will let council respond. And we have shared that marked up agreement from council with the parties.
There are different agreements. There's a bus patrol agreement that provides for internal cameras, and the county agreement that provides for the opt-in for the county system. They do not use the data for facial recognition. So the county data, the county agreement are for cameras on the arm that take pictures outside, and that's limited for enforcement of that statute. And the internal cameras do not use facial recognition and are not used for that purpose.
Kona?
Yes.
When would this start, this program?
They're ready to kick off, I believe, March 1st. However, I don't believe we'll have them installed by that date.
Okay, thank you.
They're ready to go. The county's ready to go with it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, no more questions. Then all in favor of approving, raise your hand. Yes, Mr. Parker, I don't see, yes. Okay, it's unanimous. All 7 board members have approved this.
Thank you. Moving on to our next item for discussion, which is a reopening phase-in plan. Specifically, there are 2 items I would like to discuss with the board this evening. First item would be phasing in our in-person learners from 4 to 5 days. And then second, locker room use for student athletes while participating in our athletic program. The board may recall administration's initial recommendation for the phase-in plan ended with a phase to return to 5 days in-person instruction. At that time, the board was not comfortable with the last phase, so it was removed from the initial plan. Administration has examined this final phase and has the following recommendation for the board's consideration. First, currently, remote Wednesdays is effective and supporting of teaching and learning in the hybrid learning environment. There's no doubt about that, and in particular, for those in remote only learning environment. However, remote learning is not as effective as in-person teaching and learning. That is clear based on support and feedback given by our faculty and staff. In our examination, principals met with our reopening committees to discuss and get their input on the return to 5 days. A summary of that input was shared with the board last week in the weekly update. I'm hoping that you had the opportunity to review that. Since then, I have met with our principals to review committee feedback and to explore what would be best for teaching and student learning moving forward based on the committee's suggestions. There is no doubt that the best learning environment for both teaching and student learning is in-person environment. As a result, administration recommends 2 additional phases to move from 4 to 5 days of in-person instruction. Phase 8 would be the increase for grades K to 5 in-person learners from 4 to 5 days beginning Monday, March 8th, which is the start of the trimester for the elementary schools. Phase 9 would increase grades 6 through 12 in-person learners from 4 to 5 days, but that would be beginning on April 12th, Monday, April 12th, which is the start of the 4th quarter. So to be more specific, I know I did provide something for the board to look at for details. We are in the process of developing an FAQ for parents in the event the board does approve this recommendation this evening. But for the board's and the community's information, what that means is in-person learners would increase from 4 to 5 days. Assignments would continue to be posted in Google Classroom. And for the board's information, we have about 1,400 in-person learners in grades K through 5. Remote learners, option 1. Option 1 students would need to move to option 2, remote teachers, or to in-person learning 5 days per week. We have about 70 students that are remote learners in option 2. Committee feedback was quite clear. It is extremely difficult for elementary teachers to juggle the 2 learning environments within the classroom, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Remote learners, option 2. Option 2 students will fully transition to the remote teachers. Lessons would be live streamed, Google Meets would continue, and again, assignments would continue to be posted in Google Classroom. And we currently have about 188 remote learners in option 2. With regard to students quarantined, because that does happen regardless of what learning environment you'd be in, quarantined students would connect through the AMSEL Google Meet. Teachers would live stream their lessons in Google Meet, and assignments would be posted in Google Classroom. That would be regardless where you are. So if you are in person and students needed to be quarantined as a result of COVID, that is what would happen. Students would still be able to connect with the classroom. Special area subject teachers will continue to post assignments for remote learners in Google Classroom. And yes, remote Wednesdays at the elementary level would end on March 8th. There's just simply no way it would be able to continue with 5 days of in-person instruction. Our plan, if the board does so approve this recommendation, is to put out a learning environment survey tomorrow with a return date of Wednesday of next week. And as I indicated, we are in the process of developing an FAQ document for parents. This is along the lines of the survey that we initially put out, with allowing parents to make a decision on their learning environment tri-semesterly. with regard to where they currently sit. And then I don't know if you want me to go on to speak about 6 through 12, or you would like me to entertain any questions at the elementary level first.
Can we break it out and do it elementary?
Sure.
And if I could go back and just ask you again on the numbers, as things stand right now, we have about 70 elementary students who chose option 1
Yes,
and about 188 who chose option 2.
correct.
So under this proposal, option 1 would no longer be an option, and they would become either option 2 or go in to 5 days a week live.
That's correct.
And can you detail just a little bit more about how if there is option 2, and this would be for remote students, how it would be full remote with live streaming, and how, if in any way, is that different from how the option 2 and option 1 students are experiencing this right now?
Well, right now, the option 1 students is quite different than option 2. Lessons are currently being recorded or created and posted in the Google Classroom for option 1 teachers to be able to see, and either at the time of the lesson or at a later time. And they are basically doing independent work. Okay. A lot of that work's happening on remote Wednesdays. So to be able to continue both options is just simply too much of a burden for teachers to try to create. We also talked about live streaming the lesson. But again, you know, our elementary teachers are very concerned about their students, and it's very difficult at the elementary level to try to attend to the screen and the kids in front of you, particularly when at the elementary level, elementary teachers are dealing with several subjects, quite different than secondary, where you're teaching the one subject and it's a little bit easier. I think you've heard me say secondary folks have had a little bit more success with both learning environments. In the interest of teaching and learning, the remote Wednesdays would not be able to continue because there would simply be no time to be able to support it. So folks and families that choose to want to continue remote learning, they would need to transition to, and this is the bad news, transition to a new teacher, a remote teacher only, who basically would run their classroom just as if it was in person, yet it would be remote only. So it would be a true remote learning environment for option 2 and any option 1s that choose to do that. I know that I heard from our principals yesterday, and I know of 3 option 1 students that are coming back to in-person 5 days. So that number 70 and 188 and 1417, those are all estimates, but they're pretty close. And I hope I answered your question. I might have digressed.
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Ancona?
Before, I mean, I have concerns, but I just wanted to see, how come the 6 letters from the students wanting to keep the remote Wednesdays weren't read during the public commentary?
I can answer that because they reached out to see if they wanted them read, and they didn't.
Okay, and then
And it's information, and it was provided. I believe when I spoke to Ms. Schiapoletti, it was late this afternoon, that copies would be provided.
yeah,
So I don't know if that's come through yet for board members.
yeah, it's on the board docs now. I see it, but
Okay.
then I also, and I was told that you were in receipt of a petition of 60 people that signed against the remote Wednesdays. I don't know if you received it from the organization yet, but
I have not. I have not received any petition.
So it's
No,
right now, as of right now, there are 60 people that have signed it that are against the remote Wednesdays. I mean, sorry, going back 5 days, keeping the remote Wednesdays, for
What
keeping remote Wednesdays. So I just want to let you guys know that too before we discuss it any
well,
further.
I think that all the board members are aware of all the correspondence because whenever it comes in to me, like I had said earlier, I've copied all the board on a response so they see what was said. And it is clear there are a good number of people who like it just the way it is. So that is something I'm assuming, and I'll just ask Dr. Gianni, I'm assuming that when you discuss this with the building principals, they're aware that there are a number of families that do like it just the way it is.
Sure, and I also want to, I guess, reemphasize that, I recognize that remote Wednesdays is beneficial for, some students. I wouldn't agree it's beneficial for most, and I certainly wouldn't agree it trumps in-person instruction. And very clearly, the input we received from our elementary teachers was they wanted their kids back 5 days. What was troublesome was balancing the two learning environments, and we've eliminated that balance of the two learning environments by suggesting that option one's transition to the remote teacher, and the classroom teacher focus on the kids in front of them.
Mr. Puccini was next.
So I just want to make sure it's clear, right? So option one right now for the remote students, they're only connecting with the classroom teacher live on Wednesdays, correct?
No, they're connecting for the Google Meet in the AM.
In the
Google
AM,
Meet,
just,
check
I'm
me
sorry,
out.
but it's just a Google Meet. They're not getting live instruction.
No.
So, I mean, because what I'm hearing from staff, and I, in my own research, when you really stop and think of it, it almost seems like there's an emotional attachment and the change to the classroom teacher that seems to be the biggest struggle. What I'm not really hearing, what I am hearing is that, and I think it's obvious that a full-time remote teacher is better educationally, right? They're really only connecting for any extended amount of time and getting educated by the classroom teacher on Wednesday. So I guess I'm always kind of torn as to how we can have a debate on this when it seems clear to me, especially with the input from our staff and our principals, that they will learn better if they have a new remote only teacher. And I remind the board every time we have this conversation, I live it every week. And I can assure you that, and today's a Wednesday, and by no fault of my child's teacher, he's got to prioritize those remote only students. So I don't believe my children, again, through no fault of their teacher, are being educated on Wednesdays. And I think that's problematic. And I've seen it happen. And we know that kids, I just don't think they're learning enough. And the situation really needs to be rectified, in my opinion.
Ms. Aruda?
I would be remiss if I didn't vocalize my frustration about a topic that we discussed prior to the opening. Administration had been asked several times to have remote only teachers prior to the reopening. Unfortunately, I guess hindsight is 2020, and we didn't do that. And we're put into this position right now. Going through being at the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee and listening firsthand to the administrators and the teachers and the community members speaking, painted a very different picture than what we're hearing tonight. Going through the reopening committee feedback, looking at the pros and the cons for the remote Wednesdays, keeping the remote Wednesdays, is painting a very different picture than what we're painting tonight as well. You can simply, just by eyeballing it, and I did read through all of it, the pros for returning on Wednesdays are significantly less than the cons in all the obstacles that will be faced within the classrooms, speaking directly with the staff and the administration. Again, the frustration level at the elementary, as an elementary educator my entire life, not having those remote teachers when we had asked for them, we've been put into this position once again. And we asked, teachers asked, board members asked, committees asked, and here we are being faced with a very, very difficult decision. And it is a lot on our teachers. And there are a great deal of families that want to keep it the same way that it is right now. So I just publicly had to state my feelings on that.
And I'd like to respectfully disagree with your characterization of the input. When you look through it, I think it's quite clear, and quite frankly, I think the teachers at the elementary level are getting exactly what they requested. I met with Mr. White twice this week, and he appeared to support this. And I just think you saying that you see, because there's a longer list of cons, that when you look through them, they're really not cons, they're what ifs. It's very clear to me through the principals that teachers want the kids back 5 days a week. And if that were to occur, remote Wednesdays had to end, and to make them to be able to support this, the option one teachers had to move. And then, if we, in regard to the comment about remote teachers, and you're right, hindsight's 2020.
Mhm.
No one would expect that we'd be in the situation we're in today, that we started back in August, September, October. I think administration and our faculty had done a yeoman's work with regard to rolling out a reopening plan that was good for this district, that we were able to pivot on a dime. Not many districts are able to do that. We are able to do that. And we are able to make this transition with a seamless transition as a result of the work administration did into the reopening plan.
I understand, and I'm not saying that there wasn't a lot of work done in the reopening plan. I'm specifically speaking about designated remote teachers at the elementary level. And in terms of the list, I did read through the list, and I have been doing my homework on this, not only speaking to community members, but also to teachers and administration, so that I can make a well thought out decision. So in looking at the reopening, it's not that I'm eyeballing a shorter versus a longer list. I have read it thoroughly and spoken with people.
I think Mr. Pacini had his hand up.
Do we know, and I know this is hard, but from the teachers I've spoke to, one of the biggest issues that I'm having is that the students who are in option one, the attendance on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday is minimal. Do we have data as to how often they are signing and connecting on that Google Meet? And I'm guessing we probably don't have that off the top of your head, but that seems to be a common denominator I hear from the teachers who've reached out to me, that those kids aren't connecting. So it's almost like they're going to school 1 day a week.
I don't have the data handy, but when you look at the summary of the feedback, that did come in as a secondary issue. The kids were not connecting. I haven't heard that as much as an elementary issue, but at the secondary level, yes, I did. I have.
It makes sense that it'll be more secondary, but I had heard it specifically from a number of elementary school teachers. Do we know, and I maybe answered this before, of the 900 roughly students that are on the remote only, do we know how many are on each option? Is that in here and I didn't see it?
Yeah.
I know you said that they put it's 70 and 188 at elementary, right?
Yeah, 70 option 1 elementary, 188 option 2 elementary, and 616 at the secondary level.
Thank you.
Ms. Felice has her hand
Yes.
up. Ms. Hayes.
Okay, but I think I saw Ms. Ancona's
Oh, I'm
before
sorry.
hers.
Ms. Felice can go first.
Okay, Ms. Felice.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if you just wouldn't mind allowing Board of Trustees meetings, Board of Trustees a chance to speak first before others get to speak a second and third time. I wait to raise my hand, not while someone's speaking, as to not distract. And then when other people jump in who've already spoken, it's frustrating.
Well, I'm trying to keep an eye on the hands as they go up.
No, I understand, but if someone's already spoken, ask if someone else wants to speak who hasn't spoken yet. That's all I'm asking. The interpretation of the Teach and Learn Committee, Melissa was right on, Ms. Aruda was right on point with it. Because as the superintendent was speaking, I was wondering, if maybe I wasn't at that meeting and I didn't hear the pleas of the teachers of what they were looking for. We're almost at the end of the year and we're making a major, it's being recommended we make a major change again. When we anticipated this in the beginning, as Ms. Aruda pointed out. Something else that was pointed out when we say the first pro about elementary going back 5 times, teachers want their students back in the class full time. Mr. White made that abundantly clear at the beginning of the school year. All teachers want their kids back in school. We all want our kids back in school, but we want them back in the safest way possible. And the fact that we're already underway, it's working because of the work of the district. And I do applaud the work of the reopening committees, the administrators in the schools, the principals, assistant principals, and central administration. To make another major change like this, I think is counterproductive to getting through this year, which is trying to begin with. I don't see the urgency at this point. I just don't see the urgency at this point. And the feeling that I got walking out of the Teach and Learn Committee, which is a subcommittee of, the board and supposed to give us advice, I walked out of there very convinced that we should stick to the plan and try and improve what we already do and not make another major change.
Ms. Ancona.
Thank you. So I agree with Ms. Aruda and Ms. Fleece. We've been dealing with this since the summer. Out of all the topics that we've dealt with this year, with the reopening, with the quarantine, with everything, these are the most phone calls I've gotten between parents and faculty. The fact is that by the time we roll out the high school in April, there's only 11 weeks left. And then you also have Regents weeks. June is pretty much done. So you're probably looking at even less than that. The fact that there are kids that do not treat Tuesday nights like a Friday night, like my son, and who is logging on and utilizing this time to catch up, to relax, to have their social emotional well-being taken care of during this time where they're not seeing their friends outside of school. Everybody wants their kids back for 5 days, but I appreciate those Wednesdays specifically that my son could sleep in a little later. He can get his work done. He doesn't have to be up on Tuesday nights until midnight doing his homework. He's learning time management. We have 6 kids who reached out to us stating the same thing. Please do not get rid of that remote Wednesdays. We're going to be significantly impacted by it. There are kids that are taking this seriously, and you cannot, and I'm going to assume that it's the majority that are taking it seriously just by my son's friends of seeing who's taking it seriously. It is the majority that are utilizing this time wisely, and we cannot punish everybody for a few kids that are slacking off or not using it properly. I spoke to teachers. There are kids who are logging in on Wednesdays for extra help and getting what they need. We have over a quarter of our students that are on remote right now and need those teachers' attentions. You have teachers that are at their breaking point right now, trying to plan lessons, record lessons, keep up with their Google Meet, grade 400 assignments at times, and they don't have the time, the Wednesdays they're utilizing for this time. So we're talking about social emotional well-being of everybody, but we're going to throw everybody into the boiling pot until everybody explodes. We're seeing good results now, and I do not think that now is the time. I think we need to hire remote teachers, revisit this in the summer, have an amazing reopening plan, open 5 days a week, have our remote kids, because I'm sure that's still going to be an option, have their own remote teachers. We're not changing kids 6 months into it with only a few more months left and disrupting this life. People already have that Wednesday planned, whether it's sitters or whatever it is, it's already a done deal. It's not one day, is not going to make or break a kid that's already going to school 4 days, but it will make or break a kid that's remote 5 days. And that is going to be a key thing. Those remote kids cannot be left and pushed to the side. And those, you may say they have options, but you don't know their home life. You don't know what underlying conditions they have, what underlying conditions their grandparents or parents have, that they cannot go to school. So for them to say it's easy, okay, well, just go to school if you don't like it, it is not that easy. And as parents, we all had to make this hard choice on whether to keep our kids home or send them to school. And we've made the choice, whatever it is at this point. And I really think that we really should take the time over the summer and have a very thoughtful plan for the remote students that's not going to disrupt them 6 months into the school year. Thank
Can
you.
I just ask you to clarify your comments, because I thought that we were having a discussion about K-5
I'm sorry.
only. And
I'm
I think a lot of your comments were the secondary level. Is that right?
It's the same all around. You're going to be changing things up on children and teachers, and those elementary teachers are stressing too with those Wednesdays. I mean, whether it's option, I did find out today that option 1 and option 2 see their classroom teacher the same amount. So whether they're with their remote teacher or they're with their classroom teacher, they are still seeing then the classroom teacher that they were originally assigned to, the same amount. However, on Wednesdays, the elementary kids are doing their reading groups at that point. The teachers are able to pull them out into smaller groups remotely. They're able to work closely with them without having to break the distance. So the option 1 and option 2, knowing what I know now that they're going to see their teachers the same, I don't mind that changing so much. But I still think that those Wednesdays are crucial to elementary too. You know, whether it's the students or the teachers, the elementary kids are working on Wednesdays. They're getting those reading groups that they need.
I just wanted to get clarification there
Thank
as
you.
between
Sorry.
the primary
I
and the
totally
secondary.
forgot that we
And
were.
also you were commenting about correspondence from some students, and the correspondence from students that we got were all secondary level.
Right. Yes.
Right.
I mixed
So
the two.
it was not clear from what you were just saying as
I'm
to,
sorry. I won't
Okay.
have to revisit it.
Pardon?
I said I won't have to revisit it when we move on. That's my theory, whichever.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else here with questions or comments?
I have
I saw Mr. Trenton and Mr. Puccini.
well, I have something for secondary.
Can you hold that then? We're not there yet. Mr. Puccini?
Yeah, I have to address a couple of comments because I'm pretty frustrated with this conversation, to be quite frankly. Ms. Felice said that it's working. It's not working at the elementary level. It's just not. And I think a majority of our parents and our teachers are telling us that, and we seemingly are ignoring that. I don't see how we can sit here and debate, and our job first and foremost is to provide an equitable and challenging education for our students. So I can't see how it's such a difficult decision to say 5 days is better than 4. Okay. So for the kids that are in person, that Wednesday is impactful. Okay. Because it's a disruption right in the middle of the week. It's like a weekend right smack dab in the middle. So it's not easy. And the teachers are telling us that it's harder to have the remote Wednesdays at the elementary level. They're not using it for planning and all that other stuff. They're using it to connect with the remote only students. And that's creating difficulties for them. I think that was clear in their comments and from the conversations I've had. You know, the same thing goes for the remote only students. If you talk to enough teachers, they'll tell you kids aren't all signing on to the Google Meet. They're signing in and getting attendance and not doing work during the day. So we're educating remote only students. A good portion of them are only seeking to be educated on Wednesdays. So to give them a full-time 5-day-a-week virtual teacher who will connect with them live, I don't see how anybody could debate that that is not better than what we're under right now. I understand the emotional attachment to your classroom teacher. I get it. It's difficult and it's unfortunate, but it's a better education. The kids will learn better. I don't see how we can debate that. And the comments about there's only a few months left I'm sorry, every moment in education is precious and every minute of kids in the classroom is beneficial. And it's not always about learning your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s. The environment of being in a classroom is safer and nurturing, and kids need to be there. And we know through all the data we've seen about the reopening plans that kids are safer in school to begin with. So to not send them back one more day, it's kind of bizarre to me that this is such a difficult decision for some. I mean, those comments that we got in the board update on the pros and cons, I don't see how anybody interprets it any different. And our parents and our families and our students are begging for this. And we seem to be ignoring it and listening to the voices of a few instead of the many.
Chris, I just want to say one thing. The options, I just had said that knowing that option 1 and option 2 see their regular teacher, their first assigned teacher, the same, I don't have a problem with making them go remote so that they're logging in and they get that to the remote teachers. I don't have a problem with that, but they do still need those guiding reading groups. They still need that time on Wednesdays to meet with those small groups. And I, again, did not say that 4 days was better than 5. What I'm saying is that you're losing over a quarter of your kids that are remote. You are literally pushing them to the side when you're changing things up with a few months left, instead of just having, like we asked for remote teachers in the beginning, we would not be revisiting this. We might have been able to go back 5 days right now. The fact that we don't have the remote teachers and those teachers need assistance, it's not right to let those remote kids, they need an education too, just as much as the 4-day kids.
Absolutely. And our teachers are telling us that 5 days of a virtual teacher is better than the 1 day they're getting now.
Right, that's option 1, Chris. That's option 1. The elementary student teachers want option 1 gone. They want option 2 so the kids connect with them on the Wednesdays and the AM and PM meets. If we give them option 2, the remote students will have a remote teacher all day long and access to them anytime they have a question, anytime they go have a lesson, but then they still get to see their classroom teacher for this social emotional learning. So when I was under the impression with option 1 was that they were going to option 2 was not going to see their homeroom, their original teacher. I learned today that option 1 and 2 see their regular teacher the same exact times. So those kids, the only thing by removing option 1, they get the benefit of that remote teacher all the time for the 5 days. So
can I just get Dr. Gianni to confirm that under the new option 2, the kids who've been connecting with a classroom teacher, although remotely, would continue to have some contact with that teacher, or will there no longer be any?
No, they will transition to the remote teacher only. And I want to clarify a comment that Ms. Ancona made. The small group support work that occurs on Wednesday, for in-person, that's going to occur in person. And for option 2, it will occur live streamed with the students that are learning remotely. So it will still occur. It's not going to be discontinued simply because it's happening Wednesday now. That's not going to end.
But let's just go back for 1 second. When you said, apparently right now, option 2 is still meeting with their teachers on Wednesdays. They're still seeing their teacher. Are you saying that's incorrect? Because from what I know, that's correct.
No, I'm not. I think you'd find that to be true in some instances, but I'm not saying it's not correct. What I'm saying is moving forward, if the board were to accept this plan, option 2 students will fully transition to the remote teachers.
Okay, so then I wouldn't be for that, Chris. Thank you for making me clarify that, because I would not be for that, changing a kid 6 months into a year with a different teacher. Thank you.
And the same is true for the option 1 also. The elimination of option 1, they too would no longer have the same teacher.
Right, that's why I wouldn't be for either changing. I would want to keep option 1 and 2 then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what's being proposed there is no way to continue option 1 and option 2 as it exists right now and offer a 5th day of in-person instruction. Have I summed that up correctly?
Yes, yes.
And based upon building administration and the reopening committees in each building, and I'm just talking about the elementary grades right now. The recommendation would be to eliminate option 1, make it only an option 2, where we would have all our remote students be fully remote 5 days a week, and have 5 days a week in person at the elementary grades. So that's what's being proposed.
Yes.
And that would involve disruption or another change for our youngest students, to get to know a different teacher. And did building administration take that into account when making its recommendation to you?
Yes, yes. And so let me talk about the recommendation. The recommendation is a collaborative recommendation that is a result of my conversation with building administration as a result of the reopening. And let me just clarify. Option 1 students, those are the students that would be fully transitioning to a new teacher. Option 2 students are already with the remote teacher, but they are still connecting with the classroom teacher. And we did that specifically in the event we needed to pivot back. So there was a smooth transition. Okay, so it's not that option 2 are getting a totally new teacher because they've been with the new teacher. They've also been connecting with the classroom teacher.
But they no longer would connect with
But
the
they
classroom.
no longer would. The teachers were quite clear that they can't do both environments at the same time.
So this recommendation is more to a designated remote teacher for remote students at the elementary level, which is something that we had talked about, back when the reopening plan was first talked about. And so as we sit here today, it's almost like we're looking back in hindsight and saying, we wish we had known then what we know now, because we could have done something differently. But where we are right now, and the very difficult decision to be made is whether to credit the opinion of the reopening committees at the buildings, along with the administration there, who are making a recommendation to just have full remote and in-person learning, and each would be 5 days a week. I think I've summed up how I'm seeing it.
Yeah,
So,
and let me just comment, in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have had option 1. But option 1 was added as a result of trying to keep kids with students, with their teachers who wanted to work independently. And it worked very well. It works very well for those 70 students who can work independently. But it's just too much of a challenge for our elementary teachers. And I agree, in terms of balancing both environments at the same time. And that's why it's recommended that those students fully transition to the remote teachers that we did implement some time ago.
and I know from hearing from one teacher at the elementary grade that teacher had only one remote student. Every other student was live, and the work involved was basically teaching 2 classes, one class of one and one class of the other students.
Yes, and I think you'll find the option 1 kids are spread among all it's not like they're all in one class. Everybody, just about everyone has an option 1 student.
Mr. Puccini, or is there somebody else who hasn't spoken that wants to go? Mr. Pacini?
Thank you. I guess that to sum this up, right, there's 70 students. I think you said 3 made the decision already to go to option 2. So we're talking about 67 students versus 1,420 students on where the change is. I think that really needs to be highlighted, especially since a couple board members said, well, there's only 11 weeks left. Let's not make the change now. Well, there's only 11 weeks left for them to deal with the change as well. So I really think we need to make a decision on what's best for most. And I firmly believe that's 5 days. And it sounds like a majority of our elementary school teachers feel the same way. And it sounds like even the PTA president agrees. So why we're still debating this, I'm kind of stunned.
Okay, let's try to keep it factual.
We're having a discussion about it, not debating it. Just exactly what we're supposed to be doing is having a discussion in public session about it. So when you keep saying debating it, it becomes very frustrating because we are supposed to have a public discussion.
That's
with
fine,
the
but all these excuses not to do what's best for our students.
There is no excuses.
You have
I
elements-
stop saying debating.
We're begging for kids to go back to school.
Listen,
not
Hold on just a minute.
I'm
Just a
tired of
minute.
you saying
Concerned
that.
about
Okay,
Okay? This is what
I
we're
had to wait
supposed
a
to do as a board.
this isn't gonna come down to a decision based upon who speaks loudest or who's got the most numbers. It's gotta be what's in the best interest of the school district. And there are a variety of issues that go into making that determination. Ms. Felice, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the comment that was made about Mr. White, that he's in support of it. I thought Dr. Gianni's comments were, it appears he's in support. So
He did indicate he was not in support of it.
he didn't indicate he was not.
Did not. We had a very good conversation. I think his concern was that teachers were still struggling with posting in Google Classroom. That was all. But
And that is a question that was raised to me as well. So something that has to be considered. But just to get back to the whole premise of where we are right now. Some of the comments that were made at the Teaching and Learning Committee was about the remote Wednesdays and how parents and the community needs to be educated on what they actually entail. Because the teachers that were at that committee were very emphatic about how engaged their students are on those days and how engaged those teachers are and how beneficial they thought those days were. Which is why I made the comment that I did, that according to that committee that is put together to advise this board, and there are representatives of all of the board members on each of those committees to bring it back to the full board so that we can discuss. Those were the takeaways that I got and Mr. Ruda got from that committee, the Teach and Learn Committee, the committee that's directly in the classrooms, because we don't have the benefit of the eyesight in those classrooms now to see what is actually taking place. And that's the takeaway that we got from it, that things are going, that nothing is perfect at this point. Everything is challenging at this point, but to make another major change at this point would be detrimental. And my takeaway that I got from the people who have called me, the people who have reached out, and the teachers who spoke at the committee was to leave things the way they are in those areas that can be tweaked to improve what we're already doing is what we should do. And I fully support what Ms. Ancona said about coming together with a comprehensive plan over the summer and having a full rollout to bring everybody back 5 days a week. But keeping in mind, I think remote learning is here to stay, and we have to offer that component as well. And we have to do it right.
Can I just tag on to your comment about the remote Wednesdays? From a practical point of view, if the administration recommendation were to be approved for the primary level, and all the remote children would be assigned to a remote teacher, wouldn't that in effect provide to them the benefits that they're getting now on the remote Wednesdays?
They're going to lose their classroom teachers and their friends.
yeah, that's the issue, the transition from one teacher to the next.
And that's a lot of kids because that's both options that are losing that. So it's not just.
So I think option one is a pretty good argument because they haven't seen the remote teacher. But option two has already transitioned to the remote teachers for direct instruction, and that's where they're receiving it.
So it would be less of a change for the current option two kids.
Right.
And the change to them would be they would no longer have the regular contact with the actual classroom teacher because all of their teaching would be through the remote teacher. And they would have that remote teacher available to them 5 days a week.
Yes. Yes.
And I'll second, but I guess it's a third or a fourth comment that I'm hoping that all the things we've learned this year, I'm expecting to see that come out in our plan when we look at the next school year. See how we can do things better in the future, because I heard the comment that remote learning is probably here to stay on some level for some reason. And, you know, this is something that a year ago we didn't really anticipate. So that'll, I think, be put on the to-do list, Dr. Gianni, for when thoughts start to go to next school year.
We're already thinking about next school year, and I would agree.
I'm sure you're thinking of it, but now I know you've got a to-do list also, so that one can go on that.
And I agree, remote teaching and learning is here to stay. I would agree with that.
And is any other comment or question about the elementary proposal? Okay. Do we want to do?
So I think I should get into to talk about secondary before we vote. I mean, if the board chooses to vote separately, I think that's a good idea. But I think a lot of things that you've talked about spilled into one another. I think it's for the good of the discussion just to start off discussing secondary if the board doesn't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because secondary is a little different. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, secondary teachers are having a little bit more success with the hybrid learning environment with kids in front of them and kids on the screen. And that's probably as a result of the one subject piece. In fact, Mr. White shared that with me. While elementary students are juggling 4 subjects and the kids in front of them, the secondary folks are juggling that one subject. And usually if it's a one core subject, the teacher teaches that over and over again throughout the day. So it's easier to manage the kids at home and the kids in front of them. There's no doubt that remote Wednesdays is effective at the secondary level as well for many of the reasons you just heard. But it's also no doubt that many students are not checking in, and attendance is an issue when you look at the group as a whole. So in-person learners would increase from 4 to 5 days. Same with the elementary school. Assignments would continue to be posted in Google Classroom. We have about 1,700 in-person learners at the high school and middle school combined. Remote learners will live stream, teachers will live stream their lessons in Google Meet, just that as they have been doing all year long. Assignments will be posted in Google Classroom, and different than the elementary school, at the secondary level, there is a scheduled weekly extra help session that kids get to connect with the teacher, whether it's in person or remote. Same with students in quarantine, and this has been very successful, particularly at the secondary level, that kids will connect through the live stream lessons in Google Meet and any assignments that are posted in Google Classroom, and they can continue to attend the weekly extra help if need be. Remote Wednesdays, it was clear by the feedback that if remote Wednesdays were to continue, it did need to be restructured. Right now, classes or periods are 30 minutes in length, and there's time for professional development and teachers to meet. A lot of that is in support of the remote learning environment. And quite honestly, it's been very effective and very well received and needed in terms of supporting our teachers in this new learning environment. The recommendation is to move the in-person learners, or rather the 4 to 5 in-person on the fourth quarter. And we're recommending a phase 9, which is April 12th, that Ms. Ancona mentioned earlier. So we would look to restructure the secondary remote Wednesdays on March 8th, but it would end on April 12th. Because again, with kids back in school, there's simply no way that teachers would have the time to be able to do the 30-minute remote lessons. However, the kids that are in school will be in person, and the kids that are at home will still continue to connect, but now required to connect for period by period attendance on Wednesdays. So as I indicated, secondary is a little bit different, and it is a little bit easier of a transition. But I would also suggest that clearly secondary teachers would prefer to keep remote Wednesdays.
I could just ask a
Excuse me.
question there. That means that the secondary students have to have a really good self-regulating system or a parental type person in the household to regulate, because they would have to be going to class
Yeah.
on time for each segment, each class period for 5 days a week, right?
Well, you're talking remotely? Yeah, either way, yes.
The
yes,
remote.
Yes. And they're doing that now 4 days a week.
And just again, if you could reiterate the remote Wednesdays that some young people have written about, saying they like it and why they like it. And then the benefits to the teachers from having the remote Wednesdays, and whether those benefits would be covered when the remote Wednesdays are eliminated.
Well, as I indicated, teachers have scheduled weekly extra help. So that occurs whether remote or in person. When you read a lot of the comments from the students as well as some parents, Wednesdays are being used as kind of a catch-up day, and I think everyone does like it. But when you weigh in-person instruction with catch-up for work that is generally done on the other days of instruction, I lean to in-person instruction, particularly when we have over 1,700 youngsters coming to school 4 days a week.
Ms. Ancona?
Sorry, I know that I said I was done with my point, but first, Dr. Gianni, you brought up the absences, and I brought up many times that those absences are not correct. And my son is a perfect example of that. And I hate to keep bringing him up into this, but the kid's never missed a day. And I think he has like 11 or 12 absences. So I really don't trust that system. And he was remote most of second quarter too. So those, I believe the kids are connecting, but either teachers aren't seeing it, or for whatever reason, they're not being there because the absences are completely off base. The other thing is that extra help Wednesdays, we pushed Wednesdays for extra help because not every teacher has extra help at office hours, after school, every day. And I believe it was already mentioned in one of those letters that they're not going to have, if math and English both have extra help on Monday, they're not going to be able to take advantage of it. Wednesdays, they can log in each period that they have those subjects and get the extra help they need. And again, those remote kids, that's the only private connection that they have with those teachers. And I know I keep saying it, and sound like a broken record, but that day was always important because of the extra help. The kids cannot just say, okay, Monday I'm going to go to math, Tuesday I'm going to go to English, Wednesday I'm going to go to a different subject, because their teacher may not be after school that day. Another thing is that you have kids there in the classroom for extra help in front of the teacher, and then kids on the computer for extra help. How is the teacher juggling that? It doesn't make sense again. And I'm officially done. Thank you.
Okay. Aruda,
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you just clarify for me for sixth grade? I know that we talked about this prior where there was some question whether we are going to do remote teachers for sixth grade. And I haven't heard anything more about that. I know at the secondary level, typically they are teaching all one subject. However, sixth grade, they are teaching more than one subject. So how is sixth grade falling into this? Because it is technically elementary.
Yeah, we never moved in the direction of putting remote teachers in sixth grade. Sixth grade teachers, as you know, do 2 subjects, unlike their K to 5 counterparts. And we never moved in the direction of remote teachers in that grade level.
Okay, so in this, they would just fall under the second, they're just simply falling under the secondary protocol.
Yes.
Mr. Trent?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Frankie, if I may. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Mr. Frankie, has anyone asked you what your opinion is about the Wednesdays?
They have, yes.
What do you think about them? How do you utilize them?
So me personally, and I did it today, I do use them for extra help. During the week, I have student council, I have sports games, I have other classes, extra helps that I attend. So Wednesday is that really good day where I can go to every class if I wanted to. Or today I went to math because I do not understand what we were doing. So do I use it? Yes. But either way, I am happy with whatever you guys decide with.
So you find that you can get extra help from a lot of your teachers on Wednesdays?
Oh, for sure. Yes.
And if you didn't have that and you needed extra help, what would you have to do?
Good question. I mean, I probably wouldn't be getting extra help that week because I would have to wait for the next week.
Appreciate that, Mr. Frankie.
Is, Mr. Piccini?
So I'm less passionate about Wednesdays at the secondary level. I think that kids, and it's easier for me to say that because I have a senior. So I don't mind the some extent, I don't mind the freedom because he's going to have a lot of freedom next year in college. So he's going to have to learn how to be responsible with his free time. However, I think there are probably some 9th and 10th grade parents and some 11th grade parents whose kids are grinding out for college that may disagree. So, but I can't sit here and say that I've spoken to a whole lot of those parents to know what their thoughts are. The only thing for me that I think would make it beneficial is, like I always say, kids are safer and better off in school than out. You know, whether we like it or not, is, you know, the increase in COVID rate over the last couple of months may have slowed down, but as spring comes, I do believe that Tuesday will become another Friday night. Hopefully it doesn't, but you know, teenagers towards the end of the year, when spring is in the air, if left to the option of, oh yeah, well maybe I'll sign it or maybe not. There's only a few weeks left. I'm a senior. I've already gotten my qualifications to graduate. So, you know, why bother? But again, that's less important to me than it is in elementary school. I guess my real question is, and I'm sure that there is, and maybe this is for council, but if we do not require students to attend anything on Wednesdays on the secondary level, because we do not, right? It's optional. How does that count towards 180 days? I don't see how that counts if we're not, because I mean, even you just said it's actually
before council jumps in, let me speak to that. First, kids are required to sign into one class.
Oh, that just changed, right?
Yeah, and that class counts towards state ed numbers. And I mentioned restructuring. Regardless of the board's action this evening, administration will be restructuring Wednesdays to require students to check in every period.
Okay, that makes it better.
That is something we need to do.
But prior to that, if there's no requirement to check in up until recently when we changed that, and I did forget about that one, we have to check in one class, but I can't see how we can claim, it's almost like we kind of found a loophole here to count towards 180 days and, hey, just sign this piece of paper that says you were here and go about your day. It seems rather disingenuous to me that that's technically an educational day. And I'm sure John's going to tell me it is, but I'd like to hear him.
I will defer answering that question in public
Okay, thank you.
and consult with the superintendent of schools.
Thank you.
So as things are right now, Dr. Gianni, at the high school level, the secondary level, students are signing in to each class, but only 4 days a week. And then Wednesday, they just have to sign in one time in order to get credit for the day.
I don't want to say credit for the day. We are tracking who's signing in and who's not. But if they do not sign in at all on that day, they're marked absent for the day. So typically at the high school, and I think it's second period or maybe third, we record our beds data or attendance data on third period. So if you're in by third, you're marked. If you're not, you're not. We're doing the similar thing now with remote Wednesdays. You need to check into a period to be able to count towards being there present for the day.
But the expectation is
You
for
don't.
the students who are remote on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday is that they really are signing into every class period of those 4 days.
Yes, yes.
That's the
Well,
expectation.
they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be.
Okay.
But I think what does happen because of the learning environment and because secondary teachers are pretty fluent in both environments, we have remote learners and we have in-person learners, right? But then we have in-person learners who choose to stay home and log in, right? So they're there, but they're deciding to stay, whether they're home sick that day and logging in, or for whatever other reason. So it's interesting because my conversation with Mr. White indicated that about a third of his kids are in person all the time, a third of them are remote learners, and a third of them are in and out. But they're getting credit for being there because if you're logged in, you're there, whether you're in front of the teacher or on the screen. And I think, you can't nail down any one specific for the whole range of things that could happen. I think it's a combination of things happening. But no, attendance is an issue on remote Wednesdays, and that's pretty clear.
Ms. Aruda.
And to kind of piggyback off of your question, my children are remote. They are secondary learners. They are fully remote students. So Wednesdays, they do check in at least once for attendance, and then they check in for extra help. Sometimes more than a few classes, sometimes to all of them. Typically, remote learners on Wednesdays are completing their assignments that have been assigned to them. At the secondary level, many of the assignments are due on Wednesdays to ensure that the children are working through Wednesdays and they have that time to check in. So I know in my household and in many of the remote learner households at the secondary level, that's what Wednesdays look like. So just to clarify to you and to the community what Wednesdays do look like at the secondary level. And the teachers are there available to help out any of the remote learners or the in-person learners, because let's call it what it is. We did, have to shorten down periods a little bit. So the time in the classroom is very short and it moves fairly quickly. So Wednesdays allow the students to be able to, and I'm sure you feel this too, Mr. Frankie, to touch base with the teacher, even if it's for just a simple question. And I believe the the children don't have the ability to communicate with the teacher through Google Meets anymore. I believe the chat was removed. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gianni.
The chat was the Google Meet chat, but not the connection with Google Meet.
No, the chat. So
Yeah.
if a student had to chat to a teacher, they wouldn't be able to do that outside of their classroom time. So Wednesdays really are a time that they can ask those types of questions if they can't connect with the teacher, because they don't have that option anymore to chat with the teacher.
And Melissa brings up a good point with that, because the kids are not allowed to email using their South Country email to teachers either. So just so you guys know that don't have kids in the district, if the teacher doesn't have a remind, or the kid doesn't have the teacher's remind, unless they go to a parent, there's no communication between a teacher and a student ever, because the chat's removed unless it's on these live meets. The chat's removed and the email doesn't work. So if Peter needs to get in touch with the teacher after hours, I have to use my email address to email. And then he has to keep saying, Mom, did they email you back? Did they email you back? So it's very inconvenient for students too, to not have that. And a lot of teachers make themselves available, well after the bell rings, the last bell rings. So, it's very hard for kids to communicate with those teachers outside of school.
Any more questions about the secondary level?
Okay.
Okay. I think the vote should be done separately. We'll do elementary, we'll then do secondary, and then the locker room
Yeah, then we'll,
modification.
yeah, well, I'll do the locker room after that we vote on this.
Okay.
So you want me to just try to formulate a recommendation?
Let me ask another question that's a little bit off what we've been discussing, but what about how robust are our music programs now? Or
Yeah, so that is the next item I am looking at with the principals. We discussed it very briefly on Tuesday. And we are going to, I'll be able to report back probably at our next meeting. Many of our things are just happening virtually, but I did tell the principals that I did want to start talking about opening up some of those programs as athletics has been opening.
okay.
And I will also tell you there is a great deal of concern in doing that. That was the impression I got when I began the conversation. But I'm not prepared to make any recommendations in that regard.
Well, but I would like to have facts pinned down with regard to the art, music, drama.
Okay, sure.
You can do that. Okay, so now we'll let you try to make a recommendation, but do it separately, please, between primary and secondary.
Okay, so administration recommends phase 8 for grades K through 5 to occur on March 8th. That would include in-person learners moving from 4 to 5 days. Remote learning option 1 students would transition to full-time remote learning teachers. And remote learning option 2 teachers will fully transition to their current remote teacher. And I think that, and remote Wednesdays at the elementary level would end on March 8th under that recommendation.
I'll make a motion.
You've made a motion to accept that recommendation. Is there a second?
This is only elementary, correct?
Yes. Is there a second to the motion to get it on the table? Mr. Trent, any more questions or discussions about the elementary proposal? Seeing none, All in favor of the recommendation for the elementary grades, please raise your hand. I have, let's see. I see 3. Mr. Parker, you had your hand waving around, but I'm not sure if you're a yes or a no. I'm sorry, you're muted.
No, I did not have my hand waving around.
I'm
no.
sorry. Okay, so you're not a yes.
No.
Okay, so there's 3 in favor. How many are opposed to the recommendation? I see 1, 2, 3, and I don't see Mr. Parker's hand. I see 3 yes, 3 no's. Is there an abstention? Mr. Parker's abstained. Okay,
Okay, the motion is defeated. Okay, administration recommends for grades 6 through 12, phase 9, which under that defeat would probably be phase 8, to begin on April 12th. And what that means is our in-person learners would increase from 4 to 5 days, approximately 1,700 learners. Remote learners would continue to live stream their lessons in Google Meet as they are currently doing, about 616 learners. And remote Wednesdays would end on April 12th.
is there a motion to approve the recommendation for the grades 6 through 12? We have a motion by Mr. Pacini. Is there a second? Well, I think we need a vote, so I'm going to second it. Any more questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the proposal for grades 6 through 12, raise your hand. Mr. Pacini is voting in favor. So 1 vote in favor. All opposed, raise your hand. I have 6 in opposition. That one is defeated.
Okay, and then moving on to the next item I would like to discuss is student athlete locker room use. And the reason I like to discuss that is with the board is locker room use for student athletes participating in our athletic program. Fall season is approaching, as I mentioned earlier, and with fall is football and associated protective equipment. We will need to revise our reopening plan to permit the use of locker rooms for storage of this protective equipment. Student athletes would be assigned a locker in the locker room, no less than 6 feet apart from their teammate, and the teams would be on a staggered schedule to ensure social distancing. This will be done both at the high school and the middle school. And I don't know if you had the opportunity to open the reopening plan document where I had highlighted the comment, and I'll simply read it for the board's convenience at this point. And the bullet is under locker rooms. And it reads, athletic lockers / rooms in order to store and utilize safety equipment related to participation, parentheses, helmet, shoulder pads, and other protective gear, parentheses, student athletes may be assigned a locker in the locker room no less than 6 feet apart from a teammate, and teams will be staggered schedule to ensure social distancing. That is the modification in the plan I'm recommending, and I offer that for the board's consideration.
Let's do the motion and then we'll be able to have discussion. Is there a motion? Ms. Ancona, is there a second? Ms. Aruda? Excuse me. Any questions or discussion here? Mr. Trent?
Dr. Johnny, I have the major concern of ventilation in the locker room. I can imagine that the whole team per team will be in the locker room at one time, correct?
Sure, but they would be 6 feet apart. And remember, it's not for preparing, it's for storing. You know, very simply, kids can't be carrying helmets, shoulder pads, and the whatnot around the school all day. So the purpose is to be able to put this protective equipment somewhere rather than to carry it around during the day.
I get that.
What do they do when they have to change clothes, get into uniform?
Yeah, well, what they've been doing is they haven't been using the locker rooms. They were using various spots and getting dressed. I suppose they will be getting dressed there. Ventilation in the room is adequate. And remember, they're going to be 6 feet apart. So they're not going to be, I'm sure you remember your locker rooms from your high school days, Mr. Trent. They're on top of each other. That's not what the recommendation is. Students will be 6 feet apart when utilizing the room, and we will follow social distancing protocols.
But I asked that question because I remember the locker room, and I remember the 3 exits, but we only use 1 exit really into the gym. I remember it not being well ventilated, which is why I asked that question. I could imagine the whole team will be in the locker room, possibly likely changing into their pads and their equipment, and then going back in to take that off. So my concern really is the ventilation of the locker room.
I believe our locker rooms are well ventilated, and they are ventilated with regard to having them full. So the locker room use will be significantly reduced with students being 6 feet apart. I don't see it as an issue, and as you even mentioned, with several exit, we could probably even improve that ventilation simply by opening doors. But we can certainly take a closer look at it. I don't anticipate it to be a problem. Whatever the board does prefer.
But I don't know. I guess when we do see it, that it's going to be a problem is when we start to see an increase in our sports players with COVID, I guess, when we test them. I guess that's the only way to see the problem.
But remember, we're testing weekly now.
Yeah.
So if someone tests positive, they're not there.
Okay.
And I just remind the board that, and I don't want to say we'll have the same results for the upcoming fall season, but out of all the tests for the winter season, we only had 1 COVID positive student athlete.
So when you have a large team that needs to use the locker room, would they, in order to maintain the 6-foot distance, would the team be split up? It would be staggered so that only a certain number would be in there at a time, and you'd have to wait for one team member to come out before another could go in?
Yeah, if that needed to happen, absolutely, because as I said, we're going to follow 6 feet. If we can't fit 20 people in there, and we can only fit 15, then it'll be 15 at a time until we're able to get everyone in there. We will stagger it to provide for the social distancing.
And mask wearing?
Yes, and mask.
Okay. Do you want to make your recommendation for?
Yes,
this?
I offer that for that modification for the board's consideration.
I think there was a motion in a
Yeah,
second.
but there was already a motion.
Okay. Is there no further discussion? Everybody got their questions answered? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the modification, please raise your hand. That's unanimous, 7 votes yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next item for discussion and action is the mission statement of the board's legislative committee. The committee met this past Monday, as we indicated earlier, and reviewed the draft statement and approved moving it forward for the board's consideration this evening. I have put it in board docs there for the board's review. And I do offer that for the draft mission statement for the board's consideration and approval.
Are you making the motion, Mr. Trent?
So I just have a question as to
You-
procedure.
Uh,
I just need I would like to know, is there a special reason why we have to approve this committee's mission statement?
Well, the legislative committee is a standalone committee of the board. So we wanted to make sure the board had input with regard to guiding the committee in its efforts. So that's why we're asking the board to consider it.
Thank you.
All right, are you making the motion, Ms. Felice?
Yes, I'll make the motion and then I'll comment on Mr.
All right, thank you. So I have a motion. I need a second so we can have discussion. Mr. Trent's second. Now we can have questions or comments, and Ms. Felice, you were first.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Trent, the mission statement was a charge of the committee, and we brought it back to the board the first time, reworked it a little bit, brought it back to the committee again. We did take some items out of it because we had some specific charge items that were hyper detailed that we didn't think were necessary after discussion with the committee. And so we wanted to at least have a direction because Dr. Gianni said this is a new committee. And we at least have some direction and an understanding so that there's no ambiguity as to what the role of the committee is. And that's why I offer the mission statement and recommend approval.
Well, I think the mission statement is well written, but I was just wondering because in other committees we haven't approved the mission statement, so I didn't know if we were doing something wrong over there or if there's something particular about this community, about this committee.
Well, this being a brand new committee, we decided to go in this direction, but that certainly is something we can consider for the other committees going forward, in my opinion.
I can see reasons why the legislative committee would follow a different route than some of the older standing advisory committees. And I think that what's been presented is well thought out and something that sounds manageable for the committee. So I'm glad that you pared it down a bit. Any other comments or concerns? Okay, all in favor of approving the mission statement, raise your hand. That's unanimously approved.
Thank you. And I know we commented and announced the committee chair, Mr. Pacini, and the NISBA advocacy liaison, Ms. Felice. But I also want to announce that your facilitator will be Ms. Costa, your assistant superintendent for business and finance. So thank you all for stepping forward with this important work that'll be on behalf of this committee. Okay, move on, Ms. Hayes, shall I?
Yes, yeah, we're up to G,
Yeah,
board consent agenda curriculum.
yes, thank you. So administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in schedules G1 and G2.
Is there a motion to approve G1 and G2? Ms. Aruda, a second by Mr. Parker. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? 5 yes, and 2 are not present for the vote.
Okay, moving on to personnel administration.
Before you do that though,
Sure,
because I think Ms. Shepelletti is keeping track of the votes. Do you need to know who voted?
I'm a yes. On
That's
that.
okay, I got it. I think Chris was
All right.
absent and Gina.
I'm a yes, Sarah.
Change
All
it,
right.
okay.
So far, it's a yes from everybody with only Gina absent for the vote,
Okay,
right?
Okay, moving on.
Yep, go ahead.
Moving on to personnel, administration recommends approval of personnel changes reflected in schedules H1 through H7.
Is there a motion to approve H1 through H7? Mr. Trent, Mr. Parker's a second. Any questions or discussion about these items? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, 6 in favor, and Gina Ancona is absent for the vote. So that's approved.
Okay, moving on to business items. Administration recommends approval of business items reflected in schedules I-1 through I-9.
Okay, is there a motion to approve I-1 through I-9? Mr. Trent made the motion. Is there a second? Ms. Felice, questions or discussion? Ms. Aruda?
You're muted.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I won it for the budget transfer for the COVID-19 supplies. I am assuming that's going to be for new sneeze guards for the desks.
Yes, I believe that is part of them. Sneeze guard, yes.
Okay, do we have a prototype, and hopefully a better prototype than we had before?
Oh, yeah, we have a very, it's clear. It's clear. We passed them by our administration.
Okay.
Facilities was in measuring desks, and we are getting them custom made for our desks. I believe the orders were made, and we're expecting shipments of 1,000 at a time. And as they come in, we will begin to install them.
We
But,
don't have a date
but
on.
they are clear. They do not have borders.
Okay, and do we have any date, any idea of when they'll be arriving?
Ms. Costa, do you have a date? What, I'm sorry?
The vendor said 40 weeks, but they overpromise sometimes.
Yeah. When do we order them? Yeah. So probably about 2 weeks, but the
Okay.
but the vendor has overpromised, so we're not real confident with that date.
Okay. And as they start to come in, do we have have you made a decision as to which buildings, or what grade levels will be receiving, obviously go by buildings. Are you starting at the secondary level? And moving
No,
down?
I don't know if Ms. Costa had that discussion with administration yet, but certainly we would be looking at to see who should get them first. We're just not going to send them to buildings. I think where the most challenges are first, but I haven't been part of that conversation.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about the musical agreement. That's a virtual music program.
Mhm.
I'm asking. Am I muted?
No, I could hear you.
Oh, okay.
What's the question?
I wanted to know what's being planned. Is it what type of musical program is being planned?
Can I get back to you on that? I don't know if I have
Sure.
the details. I don't have the details of it.
Okay, but I saw through here,
I can't
we-
open my-
let's see, we've got Ms. Gallagher from the music department. I think is been involved.
Yeah, I think
If,
I think I don't know if you're muted or you're breaking up, Miss Hayes.
okay, let's try that.
Now it's working.
Okay. Is there a time period that this needs to be agreed to before what's being planned?
Yes, it needs to be agreed to be able to secure what's needed for the performance. Am I correct for that, Miss?
Materials until it's paid for.
Pardon?
We can't get any materials until the contract is executed and it's paid for. we're ready to overnight the check tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we need to act on this. We're ready to overnight this check to be able to make this performance happen.
All right. So do we have a motion? Well, we have the motion for item I1 through
9.
9. All in favor? I think I see 6, 7 in favor, so the motion is passed and approval is granted for all.
Okay, thank you. I think you are up to board closing remarks, Ms. Hayes.
I think so. Here we go. Do we have closing remarks by board members? I'll do it in reverse alphabetical order. Mr. Trent, you're first.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Unistat for their donation towards the student scholarship fund. And I just wanted to reiterate something I said earlier. Dr. Gianni, I hope that you were able to look into translating our board meetings.
Yeah, Ms. Hayes already has requested that of me, and we will certainly look into that. Yes.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, Mr. Puccini.
Never come to me that early. Thank you. Okay, so just a couple quick things. Just the winter sports season is wrapping up. Our boys varsity basketball team has their last game tomorrow. If they win, they're in the playoffs, which starts Saturday. So they've got one loss on the season. They've done a real nice job under difficult circumstances. The girls didn't have as much a successful season, but I'm happy we were able to get them in to some games. They did have their season interrupted by COVID positive in the beginning of the season. And if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Gianni, you know the wrestling team, league champs?
League champ
wrestling team. So it really is great that they were able to celebrate some success. And kudos really goes to our athletic director, our coaches, our security staff. I know we talked in health and safety, and I believe we reported here, I did or somebody else, about the testing procedures. And I know Dr. Gianni mentioned it earlier today. The fact that we had one student athlete in the winter season as a COVID positive is, disappointing that we had any, but I believe it was within a few days of the season. So it seems obvious that it was not contracted during any of the practices. So, and I think that's a kudos to the preparation or procedures and those that really took it upon themselves to make sure that it was followed appropriately. Keeping a group of high school kids, in check is not easy. And I know, for example, my son hasn't really left the house to socialize with anything because this was so important to him. And it is disappointing to some extent, but at least they had something to celebrate. So hopefully their season can continue. I do have another announcement too. One of the things with sports, and I don't know what the wrestling team did, but because the winter season was so, I think most people assumed it wasn't going to happen. And then all of a sudden there was this quick decision and there was a season, it was a short season. Many of the teams, I know the basketball teams, didn't have an opportunity to fundraise. A lot of their fundraising is selling apparel and food at home games, and that's gone. And they use those funds to buy warm-ups and sweatshirts and sweatpants. And it's unfortunate that that we don't provide that stuff, but it's stuff they take home. And when you go to other districts and wealthy school districts, you see them decked out in Nike and Under Armour. So it's always been a mission of mine to do what I can to help save some, raise some money so our kids can feel, proud about their school and wear warm-ups and sweatshirts, et cetera. Through the help of the girls varsity coach and former board member, Rob Powell, we were able to secure a significant donation from a community member that was, at the very least in the short term, I had some shirts made up, warm-up shirts for the team to wear with their names on it. It happened in a matter of 4 days from when we received the commitment, and I was able to get stuff made up. We're hoping the additional funds, there could be some sort of off-season event, maybe over the summer or in the near future, where these coaches and athletes can celebrate their season, specifically the seniors. It's really a big deal. And kudos to the coaches who have put together, as I think I may have mentioned earlier, there will be a senior night celebration before the game, albeit virtual. But the fact that they're taking the time to recognize and do something, I know my son was really excited that there was some thought and process and some celebratory events surrounding his senior season. So thanks to everybody who put that together. The community member has chosen to be kept anonymous, but he's one of the most generous people I've ever met in our community. He's a wonderful man, and he does a whole lot for this community. So he knows who he is. I'm sure he's not watching because his kids are much older, but I'll make sure to give him a call and tell him what I said. And I think that that does it. Tomorrow, varsity basketball, 5:45 on our YouTube channel.
Thank you. Mr. Parker.
None, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Frankie.
So just very quickly, to keep you guys updated, we did apply for the National Student Council of Excellence Award. We're still waiting to hear back from the National Student Council, but we'll keep you guys updated regarding our status of that application. And in addition, the Bellport High School Student Council is currently planning a return to home school spirit week. So this is going to be a really fun week for both our virtual as well as our in-person students and faculty to really help everyone stay positive during this tough and unprecedented time. So we're excited about that. We're planning it. Hopefully I'll have more details in the next week or two.
Are you still doing your warm outer weather collection?
I believe we might still be collecting. I'm not positive about that.
All right.
It's amazing. I just
Yep.
have a question for Mr. Frankie again.
Mhm.
Mr. Frankie, are you attending any of the committees?
I am, yes. I wasn't able to make the one on Monday because I had a meet, but I've been attending quite a few.
Excellent.
Miss Felice.
Thank you. For the next agenda, if we could make it an agenda item, or perhaps Mr. Parker, if you would just speak to it. But the committee that you were appointed to for Brookhaven Landfill as a representative of the school district, the Brookhaven Asheville exploratory report, and the ad hoc committee that you were on, they came out with a significant finding this week, one that our district should be very proud of. We should be proud of our advocacy of putting our district on the map and making Brookhaven Town aware that we were watching what was happening at the landfill, and they chose Mr. Parker to serve on the ad hoc committee. And in doing so, the committee came up with a recommendation of not recommending expansion of the landfill and to an ash fill. And I just think that's extraordinary work under, extraordinary times. And I want to compliment Mr. Parker for the work that he did. And I know it took many, many hours working with.
Thank you.
Speak more about it next meeting, if you could.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Take a bow.
Okay, Miss Aru. I'm sorry, you have more?
Yeah, just a few more things. I know it's late. I know it's very late. We took an initiative under Dr. Gianni's leadership of changing our water fill stations at all of our schools. And in there, when they were implemented about 3 years ago, there's a counter as to how many bottles we save from going into landfills. Could we get a regular update of those of that count to show that we are walking the walk and we're trying to reduce waste instead of just saying no to a landfill? That we really have put our best foot forward, and the number of bottles, water bottles, that we are saving from going into landfills with the initiative that we took in our district alone is significant. And something like Ms. Hayes said before, there are other districts looking to our district as leaders in the diversity arena, and perhaps in reducing waste, they could look to us too as models. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. And then in conclusion, in Newsday, I sent it to Dr. Gianni, perhaps he'll share it with the rest of the board, an article in Newsday about a Mateo Asapor, who is a graduate of Belport High School. He wrote a book. It's on the Times bestseller list. And he is an excellent candidate that to maybe speak to the diversity committee. He has a Jamaican mother and Iranian father, and he's going to be giving a talk virtually that maybe some of us can sit in on at the book review that's located in Huntington. It's an informative book, a novel on satire, real life, and self-help. And I think we should do all we can to help our former graduate.
And Matt has already done, it's like a town hall, but I don't know that they called it a town hall, Mr. Frankie. Maybe you could fill us in on that, but I saw the recorded meeting and it was an exceptional exchange between Matt and the students with lots of questions, you know, about how he got there from here. And he was able to talk about the high school. So he's also funded a scholarship, $1,000 scholarship for a graduating senior. And I believe they each have to write something. I think he's going to give them a topic and they'll each write something. He'll decide which one to choose and then the scholarship's awarded. Do I have that straight, Mr. Frankie, or can you fill in a little bit about what led to him being scheduled to meet with the students?
So yeah, we had a virtual
Yeah.
assembly that was set up by, I believe, the equity committee. But it was a building-wide assembly during sixth period. Every classroom had it on. And I would say all the students and all the faculty were really intrigued by his story. And I know there was really good engagement. And I know like people went out and bought his book. I know my mother did. I know like now we're reading this book just because of the assembly that we had.
Oh, good.
Excellent, excellent. All right, good to know. Thank you very much.
Saruta.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ancona.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, I know we talk a lot about sports, but I really don't want to forget the arts and the music. And I know that there's a letter going around to petition NISMA to loosen up on their guidelines. So I really think that we should start supporting our art students and our music students. And I know that it's probably going to happen. I really have faith that the kids are going to perform closer together as an ensemble this year. I really do. Just a suggestion to parents to like start ordering bell covers for bands and stuff. I just ordered mine for my son because I'm really hopeful that it's going to happen. But I know that will probably be a requirement and we probably should have required that in the beginning of the year, but Amazon does have them very cheap and 4-packs and stuff. So you can get them for all those instruments. The other thing, my mind's at the end of the year events already. And a few things I noticed on our websites, the high school and the Belport and the middle school does not have a clear link for yearbook ordering. So I wanted to see if we can put that link up for Jostens. I mean, I knew the website, so I just went on there, but I did spend like a good 20 minutes trying to find it. And I'm sure that parents are going to start remembering that it's time to order. If they haven't already, I might actually be behind in the game. And I would like to see now that weddings are loosened up to the guidelines and stuff, if we're planning a senior prom and what's going on with that. So if we could start getting some end of the year events notifications next meeting or next 2 meetings. I really want the kids to start enjoying school, you know, and what the benefits of it. So all the good things at the end of the year, and not just for the seniors, for all the kids. So we could just get some kind of update next week of what we could look forward to come the spring with the loosened guidelines. I'd appreciate that.
I'm the last trustee to make a comment. And I just wanted to say that the reopening plan from the beginning all the way through has presented each board member with a very difficult decision-making, and it's not easy for anybody. There are a lot of pluses, there are a lot of minuses. There is a recognition that on some level, each case is different. And how do you go about making decisions in those circumstances? But the one thing I can say wholeheartedly is that every single member of this board cares deeply about the best interest of every student in this district. And while we may not agree about certain decisions, I think could each say we do agree that the other board members put thought into it and they cared about it and they made their best efforts. And I guess that's just to sum up and say that the decisions that we make, there'll be some people that are happy about it, some people that aren't, some who wonder why we are so concerned about doing the best that we can. But I think that that's what we are doing. I think that the administration and the building staff and the various reopening committees that were involved in making recommendations, again, everybody involved, I think it's fair to say, has the best interest of the students at heart. So I would thank my fellow board members, and I would thank the superintendent, his office, the building level administrators, and all the staff and everybody else who was on the various reopening committees. And we will look forward to getting more information from the superintendent with regard to some of these issues that were mentioned, like the art and music programs. And our next meeting is 2 weeks now, I believe.
Thank you, President Hayes, for making those comments, because that definitely needed to be said.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Aruda, and a second by Ms. Ancona, all in favor. This is unanimously approved.
Good night.